Nate, you've been busy, dude. Africa, reading books. I mean, what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah, man, that's it. It's funny because you'll talk to people and they'll be like, I'm too, I'm, you're too busy. I'm like, well, this is the reason I'm busy. It's like, let me have it. Let me have the, let me have the fun. I'm busy because I choose to be.
It's funny you should say that. Just the other day, someone was quoting on how insane my schedule is. And it's insane, right? I mean, like, it's stupid busy. And someone asked me if I ever felt overwhelmed. And I told them in that moment, and I really believe this, I have never been this happy and this busy simultaneously, right? Like, I feel like I'm engaged in something good. We can get stuff going, right? Like, really, this is the most happiest I have ever been as a man because I feel like I'm right in the middle of stuff. And I
Yeah.
think that's the way we were all meant to be, right? That anxiously engaged in a good cause sort of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fulfilling the measure of your creation, doing some great preaching, doing some great,
Yeah,
man.
just I don't know about that. I just have other people on that do all the great preaching. I just ask questions. But dude, when you hit me up just earlier today, you were talking about this book that's out in Deseret Book now that's not just presenting evolution in like, hey, this is what it is, sort of a thing, but like really espousing it, right?
Oh yeah.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Let's Talk About Science and Religion.
Okay. And who's it by?
It is Seth Bybee and Jamie Jensen, and it's a series. Um, they just wrote the science one, but it's a whole series on different, controversial church topics. And basically, the whole series, I've only focused on the science one, but the whole series has a pretty big liberal lean to it, and it's rather disappointing to say the least.
And it's a Desert Book, right? It's not like they got to
Oh, yeah.
go looking for this book.
It's published at Deseret Book,
Wow.
which is owned by the church.
Okay. All right. Well, dude, let's before we just dive in, one of the reasons that I really perk up when you bring stuff like this up is that it's you're not you're an active member of the church. You're a true blue believing LDS guy, right? And I would raise an eyebrow if this was coming from another source, but because it's you, I I I tend to put more weight on the gravity of the situation because it's you, right? If this was coming from a fundamentalist, I would be like, well, I'd have to sit down and read the whole book, right, to make sure that it's, on the up and up. But when you bring it to me, I tend to raise an eyebrow a little more because your dog in this fight is to preserve the gospel within the church. And so I tend to treat that a little more seriously, if you will. So,
Yeah, church members, the DNC says that the church members are supposed to, raise their voice on things and judge things. We're not just supposed to be silent, um, mindless. We're supposed to actually, you know, like when they're going to take all those murals down from the historic, what was it? I don't remember which one, but
Manti.
the Saints were like, no, don't mess with our murals. And they're like, oh, okay, sorry. So like we do need to speak up because it does matter what we say. And it's not just, the apostles aren't like the demigods that, need to be the dictators. I mean, obviously they're getting revelation and we sustain that and that works, but it doesn't mean the members just need to be pushed around. Because like this book, it's not written by apostles, it's not an official church publication, but it is being sold at the church's bookstore and it is being promoted in church magazines. So it's definitely, I mean, there's groups of members just having these book clubs on it and like, well, I guess it's being sold at Deseret Book, so I guess this is the will of the church. No, this is just by some random church member who happened to get published at Deseret Book. And of course, it matches the Deseret Book brand because they're pretty much their brand, I guess, is anything that matches the mainstream. That's their brand because I know there's some creation science friends of mine in the church that they try to publish some of their stuff at BYU that doesn't match with evolution, and it gets the big thumbs down. They say, "Oh, sorry, this doesn't match our brand."
Wow. Well, and we'll go into that more later, but that's something to keep in mind as we go along through this for sure. So I'll let you get into your slides here because I looked at them and they're troubling to be sure. So
Yeah, I've taken like 70 quotes from the book and I've done a point by point response. So this isn't like perfectly organized, but if you bear with me, you will get a really good idea from this show about what is in this book. And for one, you're going to learn that evolution is definitely being advocated at BYU.
ooh,
Um, it's in the old days, it was they either skipped over it, calling it theory of men, or they said, okay, let's make you aware of this, but we're not going to promote it as truth. It's just here you are getting an education, so you may as well learn about a popular theory, and that way you can make your choice, right? About
right.
whether or not, but that's not what's happening at BYU anymore. I graduated there in 2019. I went there from 13 to 19, and I had multiple professors promoting evolution as the God-given truth. And I have audio recording still from a class that I took on the basic Bio 100 class, where the professor was saying that all life forms evolved from a common ancestor.
Mm.
And just unapologetically, just saying these things. And here we are at a church school where we're taught growing up that we're children of God, but now we're finding out that we're children of the ape man. And it's really pretty backwards theologically in a lot of ways. So um, it becomes obvious really fast when you read the book that, you know, these are diehard evolutionists. Um, they talk all about the Earth being, so many billion years old and life appearing on Earth so many billions of years ago, and this doesn't match our scriptures at all,
Hmm.
you know. And they talk about how we're the only human-like ancestors left from the various species. So it's very clear that this is all about evolution. The book also talks about some other controversial science topics like vaccines, GMOs, um, but I've focused on the evolution topic because I feel like that's really the big hitter.
Okay.
I know there's been tons of vaccine controversy with COVID, but I mean, if you can swallow evolution, that's wiping out Christians around the globe. It is so bad. Um, the author, so on the back cover of the book, it explains that Jamie Jensen, okay, so it says, quote, she is also a member of the broader Social Impacts Committee for the Human Origins Initiative at the Smithsonian, joining other religious scientists to help the American public feel more comfortable with evolution, close quote. Okay,
Phew.
so her mission is to get Christians to accept evolution. Okay, and that's what they're doing at BYU. They're collecting statistics about how many kids they can turn over to believe in evolution. And they do want you to believe, they want you to basically commit and um, just turn over your whole way of thinking, not just to consider it as one of many theories, but to be converted to evolution as like the bedrock truth. The whole point of this book is to say, look, evolution's obviously scientifically proven, so now we need to take our religion and we need to rearrange all of our religion to make sure it fits with evolution.
Is there a more
It's just,
apt description of the philosophies of men mingled with scripture than that?
yeah, man, that's it. That's it. It's
Ugh.
like here our philosophies are our most favorite thing, and then if we can toss in a verse or two here and there that would make us feel cozy inside.
Ooh, that's
It's
spooky stuff.
sickening. It's completely backwards. Our faith is supposed to be our bedrock foundation. And then when we encounter science that matches with that, we accept it. When we encounter science that doesn't match with that, we're extremely skeptical. And we don't accept it as truth because we know that, faith means you put God first. And, you know, so
Wow.
there's this, like I said, a lot of people still don't even know we're teaching evolution at BYU. The older generation, I guess. Bio 240, evolutionary biology. The course description says it's an intensive examination of evolution as the conceptual cornerstone of biology. So what I want to know is this. If evolution is the cornerstone of biology, okay, so that means evolution is the cornerstone of how God made the earth and how he made the animals and the plants, okay, and the people. So this is very theological, okay?
Right.
Um, so the Bean Museum, on their website, it says, "We inspire wonder, understanding, and reverence for our evolving planet." Okay, it's just everywhere you turn. Okay, and then right when you walk in, there's this display on pre-Adamites. All these monkeys and half monkeys and there's this tree that supposedly connects them. And we're to believe that these were, what went on. Um, and a lot of people have been duped by this, man. A lot of people have been duped by this. Hugh Nibley didn't even get this all right. Um, he would kind of kowtow around the idea that, yeah, I guess we got these Neanderthals. I don't know what to do with them. And, but really, um, they have no place in the restored gospel. These are skeletons of people, children, disabled people with the crooked spines and this and that. People have different size heads. That's normal. Some people have the enlarged brow ridge. Some people have the extenuated jaw. Like depending on what muscles you use, what foods you eat, like you're gonna have about as many different looking skeletons as there are people in the world. Okay, and then you've obviously got the monkeys. There's lots of different species of monkeys, and they're going to have all kinds of different looking skeletons too. They can also have diseased skeletons. They can also have different habitats of what was being eaten. So the possibility for variation between these is stark. And then later we'll talk about the hoaxes too. I guess I'll just bring it up now. This is audio, not video, right? So I may as well
It's
just,
both. It's both.
it's both. Okay.
Yep. I publish on Rumble for the video because I'm
Okay.
less likely to get flagged for having conversations like
Oh,
this.
okay. So I should share my screen then.
Yep.
Okay, let me do that.
So let me, while you're bringing that up, I want to push back here a little bit because, like, I feel like the stark dividing line is not so much young Earth versus old Earth, right? I feel like we can disagree amicably on that. Even pre-Adamites to a degree. My ultimate sentiment is this though. Once the Adam story starts, we have a definitive answer, right? On when quote modern human life begins, right? And so look, if you're an old earth creationist, I got no issues with that. What I do have a problem with is when they say that we start evolving from apes, because and I'm going to get into this later. There has been a ton of just human atrocity perpetrated because of this theory,
Yeah.
because it turns man into nothing more than an evolved primate. And when you start going down that road, there's some dark stuff there.
Amen. By their fruits you shall know them, right?
Yep, absolutely. All right, go ahead.
So
I'm done. Sorry.
the fruits of this theory are, you know, mass genocide
Yep,
and extreme racism
yep,
and just about every other terrible thing you could think of.
Absolutely.
Um, it's basically just a completely immoral, whatever works. You know, what's the word for that? Um, anyway, uh,
Abomination. That's a
yeah,
good word for it.
abomination, and let's see, maybe I'll think of it later. Um, so since I know you got the video here, uh, this is what the book looks like. Okay, it's this little green book,
Okay.
and then there's a funny picture of reading the Book of Mormon or reading this book about how you're a monkey. And then this is the BYU Life Science Museum, the Bean Museum. Those are the Neanderthal displays. So,
I like, is that your
um,
thumb giving the old thumbs down?
that's my buddy Jeremy Michel.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and I guess yeah, never mind. Okay. I just want to mention in passing that Jeremy actually he said I could talk about this a little bit. He wrote to Elder Oaks and he said, "Hey, or President Oaks, I mean, he said, "Hey, what's going on with, all this evolution stuff going on at BYU and the Bean Museum and showing that we came from monkeys?" And Elder Oaks's reply in summary was, "At BYU, we're showing people what the teaching of the world is, but we're not advocating these philosophies of men."
But
That
that's
was
not correct.
that was the summary of Oaks's response. And we would say we have tons of evidence that that is not correct. They're actually advocating it. So it seems like there is some innocent, you know, like my purpose is not to criticize anyone, especially, my leaders I'm promised to follow. My job is to say, hey, let's just make sure we know what's going on here. And if you guys are okay with this, like, are you okay okay with this? Because a lot of us aren't. So,
Right.
okay. Obviously, Brigham Young, he despised evolution. He said, um, "We have enough and to spare at present in these mountains of schools filled with young infidels are made because the teachers are so tender-footed they dare not mention the principles of the gospel to their pupils, but have no hesitancy in introducing into the classroom the theories of Huxley, of Darwin. This, of course, this course I am resolutely and uncompromisingly opposed to. And I hope to see the day when the doctrines will be taught in the schools, etc." Okay, now BYU, um, they do make you read a little, they'll make you. Okay, there's a little packet where they'll have a few statements about evolution and religion in your introductory biology class. Um, but aside from that, they just trudge right ahead and dump on all the evolution teaching. And I had multiple, like I said, multiple professors try to persuade me that they didn't just teach me a theory, they actively tried to persuade me um, to accept this. And when I talked to them about the controversy and how there's been teachings against evolution for, 100 years, they just, literally laughed at the idea and just shrugged it off as the prophets are wrong. Like they're just shooting from the hip.
Good.
Um, In 1909, there were three BYU professors fired by Joseph F. Smith for promoting that scripture is not literal revelation from God and promoting Darwinian evolution and progressive interpretation of church doctrines. So basically, when you start to get into evolution belief, the theological and philosophical trail that leads down really doesn't mesh well with the scriptures. And so you have to start getting this symbolic interpretation of scriptures. The evolutionists in the church that I meet frequently, they are very soft on the Adam doctrine. In other words, they don't believe Adam was a real person. They says it doesn't matter if Adam was a real person. There's a famous atheist who said what evolution has done is take away the idea of a first man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the Doctrine and Covenants says directly that Adam was the first man. Okay.
Right.
So this is an important part of the restoration, that there was a first man. And we in her book, in this Let's Talk book, they talk about Adam a little bit. And we actually ran into her at a conference and we asked her a little bit like, what are you going to do with Adam? And Jamie says, Oh, I have a few ideas for that. Maybe everything was evolving, and then when the monkeys were like finally turning into almost humans, that's when God sent Adam down. And um that doesn't make a lot of sense, because why does God need to even be involved if that's already, going on? Um, that that really doesn't make a lot of sense. Or she says maybe it's like when the evolution was just at the perfect moment, God puts Adam there. It's like, well, then you've got two, it's like you're saying two engineers made this car. It's like, no, you only need one creator. You don't need the creator of evolution and the creator of God. God can do this stuff. He doesn't need evolution as well. Look at when Jesus healed the sick. He didn't heal them in a million years by slow process over time. God has the power to do things right now. He can command the elements. He can make creation happen. He can take those existing materials and he can organize them. He can change water into wine, right? He can do things that we don't understand. And the whole point of evolution theory is to take God out of science. It's to say, look, you didn't need God for this, because look, it could have happened this way. Okay, what's the heart of evolution theory? It's natural selection, right?
Right.
Natural selection is the opposite of supernatural.
Right.
We need to realize that evolution theory was designed as a way to get God out of the picture. And so, why do we feel a need to explain our origins with this clearly atheistic theory? If its origins were to destroy the Bible and to destroy God, how is it going to somehow turn out to be the very cornerstone of biology, the very way that God created things? So it's really laughable when Christians try to say God used evolution. And that's pretty much what all the members are going with right now. Oh, yeah, God used evolution. And then you ask them, okay, so who was Adam's dad? Like, well, I guess it was like a Neanderthal. And it's like, well, that's not what the scriptures say. This book of Luke says, it's chapter 3 or something. It says, so and so, the son of so and so, so and so, and Adam was the son of God. So however you want to look at that, one fact is very clear in the restoration, that humans are of divine origin. We're coming from up high. We're not coming from down low.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Evolution is you started really low and then you went up.
Mm-hmm.
Real religion, Christianity, is you started with God and then you fell. Okay.
So there's a couple things here. One is whether you're a fundamentalist or a LDS person, the temple is supposed to guide you along the path to godhood, right? That's the whole point of the temple ceremony. And in addition to teaching you how to communicate with God.
Mm-hmm.
If evolution is a true principle, right? You are now short circuiting that to a degree, because now you're saying, well, if a monkey can evolve into a man, then likewise, over time, wouldn't a man just morph into a god? I mean, that seems to be the secret ingredient in the sauce, right? It's just time. So it
Yeah.
makes no sense that way. The other thing I would say is I don't have a problem with a university teaching evolution, but call it what it is. It's a theory,
Yeah.
like everything else, right? I do believe that there is value in understanding the argument. I'm not a believer in um, withholding theories. I think the best the solution to bad ideas is to talk about them, because out of that usually comes better ideas. But when
Yeah.
you start making that theory of evolution the sole um narrative, well, then I got some issues, because now you're not just presenting both sides of the argument. Now you are espousing a certain point of view that, quite frankly, is anti-scriptural. It doesn't keep in keeping with revealed revelation from the prophets. There's some issues here that have to be dealt with head on.
Yeah. And um yeah, the first presidency has said numerous times that Adam was the first man and the first flesh, and that he was the offspring, the lineal offspring of God. And it's, I mean, unless you got a PhD, it's really hard to see how that works with coming from a monkey, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
And you know, they'll play word games. They'll say, "Oh, we don't say you're coming from a monkey." It's like, well, if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, yeah, you do. You're saying the
Right.
lower life forms through time became the humans.
Absolutely.
So there's all kinds of word games to try to make it look like we're misrepresenting what the theory is. Um, and just to put this emphatically, if you want to say God used evolution, you're not teaching evolution theory. Evolution theory is natural selection, not supernatural. There's nothing supernatural allowed. Evolution theory is natural selection. And so, and that's the thing, is they are promoting the whole hardcore spectrum, the whole evolution theory. They're not, um, you know, in their book, they have a few vague references to, oh, God is the creator, praise the Lord. Like, aren't his creations wonderful? But we can only say that so long when we're rejecting all the scriptures about God. And how long can we even call ourselves Christians if we're totally rejecting everything Christ said? Because the Lord said, you know, you can say, Lord, Lord, but you're not gonna, that's not gonna get you into my kingdom. You know, you gotta actually do what I say and subscribe to these correct things, or a lot of bad stuff's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
And when I was at BYU, I had no clue that there was any kind of alternative science. Not a mention, not a whisper, you know? And there's this BYU professor who famously said, um, to my friend, Dean Sessions, he said, there will never be any evidence for the flood of Noah.
Hmm.
There will never be any geological evidence for the flood of Noah.
When have we ever heard that the science is settled?
Yeah. So here we have this epic flood that covered the mountains. And by the way, it wasn't a local flood, or else God would have just told Noah to move, and he wouldn't have bothered gathering all the animals on the boat. Okay, this was a worldwide flood. And so do you think it's going to change the geology? You know,
Well,
it's,
and let's honestly look at history, right? Why is it every civilization in the world has a flood story?
yep,
Every one of them, from the Chinese to the Babylonians to the Hebrews to Native American tribes, they all tell a story of a cataclysmic flood. Um, Sometimes I think that one of the more derogatory things we do to our ancestors in different cultures is that we just automatically dismiss their stories out of hand. Um, like, well, they don't know what they're talking about, right? You go back to the days when they were called the noble savages, right? Some pretty derogatory and racist terms that I think deserve to be scrutinized heavily.
yeah. Um, yeah, in science, we've given ourselves these false parameters that nothing supernatural can be involved in the creation.
Right.
And if you want to have those, you know, arbitrary parameters on science, then yeah, you're never really going to figure it out. The Book of Mormon actually says you can't learn about the creation except by the spirit of revelation. So they will never, ever learning but never able to come to the truth until they allow the supernatural. Um, my the best explanation I've heard to how life came on this earth. Actually, I was recently acquainted with a Joseph Smith statement that not only the people but the animals as well were brought here. They
Hmm.
didn't originate on this earth; they were brought here.
Right. Yep.
Like I think the way Brigham put it was, if you're gonna go start a new farm, you're gonna take your equipment and your seeds and all this, and you're gonna bring it over and do that. You're not gonna start everything from scratch, right?
Right.
So that makes tons of sense. Um, and
Can, can I elaborate on this just a little bit? Because I think this is worth pointing out. And it's a connection that I've made. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be wrong on this. But if we look at the conflict in Israel right now, if we look at the problems we're having on the southern border, the one word that gets used over and over again are colonization, right? The Israelis are colonizing Palestine. America is colonizing, or the United States is colonizing America. And what it's done is it's created, and it's classic Marxism in the sense that there's an oppressor and an oppressed class, right? And they need that to work. Now, if you look at what the gospel purports, which is there was an intelligent being that came here and placed man in the garden,
yep,
that's a form of colonization. I don't care what anyone says, that's what it is. So if colonization is bad and you have a political agenda to prove that, this doctrine, whether it's the Adam God doctrine or the doctrine of creation, it's a kind of colonization, right? And now it becomes incumbent upon you and those who sit in the White Tower of academia to put this down because they're forced to in order to back up their political theory, right? If man is a naturally occurring being that is a combination of cells and bacteria that get hit by lightning and then begins the evolutionary process, well, then you're not a colonizer, you're simply a native. And right now, where quote colonizers are bad, they have a vested interest in making sure that you are just a native being of the planet, so to
yeah.
speak.
Yeah, it's crazy how they work their way right up to, even God's a bad guy because he's a colonizer, right?
Yep.
Um, and of course, there's good colonizers and bad colonizers. Would you rather be colonized by the British Empire or by the Aztecs, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. There's yeah.
Um,
No, it's absolutely part and parcel of the same thing. And there is a
uh,
narrative that is being pushed, and it's even being pushed at BYU. And it has to be dealt with head on.
yeah, human nature is never going to change. We're always going to want to explore. We're always going to want to create new things and make things better. If we find something that's kind of not very good, we're going to say, hey, guess what? I'm going to do this better than you. And the people are going to support me in that.
Yep.
And that's okay, you know. And, hopefully if you've got something worth holding on to, hopefully you are diligent and you, s- you prepare yourself, like Moroni, preparing those fortifications all the time to where you can stand up and defend what you've got. Um, so like we were saying with how things get brought to the earth, this is a very different idea of how life originated than evolution. And I guess the Latter-day Saints who espouse evolution just kind of don't know about this, or they just throw all that away, about how life didn't originate on this earth, it was brought here. Um, one, you can find that deep in the archives, right? But let me give
Mhm.
you a really obvious analogy. It's the Ark of Noah. Think about that symbol. It's a person, or a family on a vessel filled with animals and everything else that'll be needed. They sail over and they start the new world. So I think that's a big analogy for us to help us understand the creation.
Right.
Okay, let's see here. Let's go on with a little bit of this. Here's some quotes from their book. Okay, this is really crazy because they're basically saying anybody who's anti-evolution is of the devil. Okay? They literally say this, okay? Quote, you can almost think of educating ourselves and our children about evolution as a vaccination against Satan's attempts to destroy our faith. Satan seeks to infuse doubt into our minds whenever we encounter something in science, as in evolution, that seems to disagree with what we thought about the world, close quote.
uh,
So if it contradicts mainstream science, which remember, the cornerstone of mainstream science is evolution. If it contradicts that, it must be the devil.
right.
So all you meanies who are out there trying to stop us from teaching evolution, the devil's in you.
We're
Okay.
Korahor.
And they again, they say again, quote, we have encountered individuals who have the mistaken idea that providing pseudoscience will somehow save testimonies. They place the blame for declining religious devotion among the rising generation squarely on science, meaning evolution, and believe that creating and teaching an alternative to science, as in evolution, will not threaten testimonies and will help students avoid spiritual conflict. Okay, keyword whenever they say science, it's evolution. Okay,
Okay.
this book is a hit piece to get you into evolution. They're saying science to make it seem like we're backwoods yahoos.
Right.
And they say pseudoscience. Okay. They call anything that's not evolution pseudoscience.
Sure.
It's so convenient because all of their science is the true stuff. And anything that doesn't match that, that's the false stuff. That's all
Right.
the fake stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they even quote D&C 50 verse 3 about says Satan hath sought to deceive you that he might overthrow you. Okay, they really took this Satan line pretty far. I mean, they hit it pretty hard about how anyone who disagrees with them about evolution is clearly of the devil. So
Jeez.
I can't get enough of that. Let's go on here. Um, okay, they say they've got mountains of evidence, so that scientists have not come lightly to evolution conclusions that all organisms evolved on the earth. Okay. So anyway, these are merely mountains of chaff. Um, they say they're going to talk about evolution in a non-threatening way. They say this approach is effective in increasing evolution acceptance. Close quote.
See, and
So
this is where it's not science. Let's be perfectly clear about that. Your goal is not to quote preserve faith. It's not to try and um do honest science. They're telling you right here they have an agenda. And the agenda is the acceptance of evolution. Period. Okay? The scientific method, from my understanding in high school, was you have a hypothesis and then you collect evidence that either proves it true or proves it wrong. But when you start from a place of, I have a worldview, and now all of this has to fit within that worldview, and then you doggedly stick to it despite evidence, that's an agenda. That's not science. Let's not mince words here one bit.
yeah, it's very clear with her description of her role with the Smithsonian and just her self-admitted mission that I know less about Professor Seth Bybee, but clearly Professor I mean they co-authored this book, Professor Jamie Jensen is, you know, out to get us.
Yeah.
Um, so it's funny because when they call everything pseudoscience that doesn't match with evolution, um, they they're saying, well, we're trying to get rid of science. Okay, but since when are we saying, like you said, since when are we ditching the scientific method? It's not like we're out here saying, I'm done with making hypotheses. No more making observations and tests and it's not like we're rallying around with pitchforks and saying the scientific method has got to go.
Right.
You know, we're not anti-science.
Right.
We are just pointing out that there are epic amounts of scientific information that don't hold up with evolution, And we're pointing out that we should have known better because our scriptures said so all along.
Right.
There's a ton. Okay, so you could ask, where is all this evidence in the scientific community for, that is not with evolution? There are creation science journals that are good stuff that a lot of the Protestant communities are involved in, and of course non-Protestants too. But the problem is when the board of directors of these academic journals are all diehard evolutionists, like they're not going to publish anything that's against
No.
evolution. Not a chance. And it's like in Russia, in the Soviet Union, where were the capitalist professors at the universities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They
So
didn't last long. They were
yeah,
fired in more ways than one.
yeah. There's a lot of scientists that they know about this, but they won't talk about it because they're going to lose their funding. They're
Hmm.
going to lose their job. They're going to be the laughing stock.
Yep.
So it's just one of those things. I mean, it's like the difference between mainstream Christianity and the Restoration. Sure, there's a lot of great stuff in mainstream Christianity, but boy, there sure is a lot more in
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Restoration.
Yep.
And that's what we have when we don't have to cling to evolution theory, is we get a lot more truth. Let's go through a few more of these. Um, okay, let's talk about the human-like ancestors a little more. Again, I'm not gonna, for the sake of brevity, I'm not gonna read all the quotes I have.
Okay.
I have over 70 quotes from the book that they're, they say humans and animals hint at an evolutionary past, that we're the only species left from the human-like people. And, you know, they talk about all their hundreds of Neanderthal findings from, people, Neanderthals from 400,000 years ago. Okay. But like I said, we've got short people, tall people. These are the pygmies. Okay. I actually saw some pygmies when I was on my Africa trip. Um, I mentioned we actually went, and me and Jeremy and Adam, Jeremy Mitchell and Adam Salisbury went to Africa for 3 weeks with a guide from France because there was a lot of sightings of it's called the Mokele Mbembe,
Hmm.
and it's this long-necked creature. It's about the size of an elephant that looks a lot like some kind of sauropod dinosaur. And the thing is, this is in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wants to go there because there's so many bugs. There's very minimal technology out there. Um, it's by and large, you could call it unexplored. And if there's legends of dragons all around the world, right? In historically,
Hmm.
and if you've got a young Earth where the dinosaurs died in the flood of Noah, it's not beyond reason that a lot of these stories of these big creatures, and there's even like 3 or 4 mentions in the Bible of these giant monsters, right?
Hmm.
So there really could be some of these things around. And if they're finding the soft tissue in the dinosaur bones, like lots of them, which limits them to 30,000 years old. So anyway, yeah, so as far as I already talked about how there's the bones and the different size bones and stuff. Let's go on to another one. Okay, we talked about the racism with evolution. This is Oda Benga, someone uh, that they captured and put in a display at a zoo. They filed his teeth to look sharp, and they displayed him as the lowest form of human development. The guy is
Jeez.
just, he's a family guy, wife and kids. He committed suicide from this insane, and if nothing else, psychological torture. Um, so Okay, you can also have bent spines like this, where you've got, kyphosis, scoliosis, and so that can be an explanation for some of these. We don't need to always immediately say, "Oh, that's a monkey man right there." That is definitely a monkey man. Okay.
Right.
Um, And then when they do have their displays, like this is Lucy display, look how it's standing upright.
Right.
Okay. And then look how it has the feet are human feet. It doesn't have the toe that sticks out like the monkeys do that grip to trees. It's a big difference. And on the Lucy find, they didn't find feet. They just decided that yeah, because they had their bulletproof fact of evolution, that they can go ahead and give human feet to this monkey skeleton, right? So anyways, whether this is a human skeleton or some kind of pygmy skeleton or a monkey skeleton, I'm not the world-class expert, but we can tell enough basic things. And that's another thing is you don't have to be a world-class expert to figure out basic truths, okay? Um, look at the eyeballs. This creature that they made, this monster, has white eyeballs. Okay, that's another human feature. All humans have white eyes. And the hands as well. They gave it very human-like hands. Um, and the guy who's looking for the guy who found this Lucy was on a grant to find the missing link between monkeys and humans. And 2 weeks away from running out of grant money, he found this skeleton.
Okay, I want to point out a couple of the things here that you have in this slide. One is the skeleton was found over a 2 mile radius.
Yeah.
And what are they using to say that this is the same skeleton? Are they using DNA sequencing? Is that what they're doing?
No, it's not DNA sequencing.
Then how are they making this claim? Because there's only one way I could think of to figure out if this was the same skeleton, which would have been DNA sequencing. The problem with that is that we know that primates travel in groups, right? There's packs, so to speak. And you would expect to find a lot of the same DNA within those certain packs, if you will. And so I would be very interested to hear the explanation of how is it you found a whole skeleton spread out over a 2 mile radius and you said this all comes from the same person. That makes no sense.
Yeah. There's a book, Bones of Contention, and you can go case after case and look at all these supposed finds and all these things that have been in the books and break them down to where there's just endless hoaxes. Um, and yeah, the DNA being the same as human DNA. But this is another problem. A big problem with evolution is what came first, the theory or the missing link between the humans and the monkeys. So clearly, Darwin sees the birds with the different sized beaks and all that. And we can all admit that clearly animals can make little changes like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've manipulated dogs into very different kinds of dogs, but there are limits. You're never going to take a dog further than its limits, you know?
Right.
And if you crossbreed two different species, you got the limit right there that where their offspring will not be fertile. And so there's these basic laws of genetics that somehow, if you add in millions of years, the laws of genetics change.
Come on, Nate. Let's be real though. How many times have you seen a can of Coke turn into an orange? I mean, it happens all the time. Um,
Yeah.
Real quick, the skeleton that you have in this slide, is that the complete skeleton? Is that what they're calling the skeleton?
Yeah, that's from Wikipedia. That's the complete skeleton.
And so from this skeleton, which I mean, I'm just guessing here, 20, 30 pieces maybe, and you somehow extrapolate out of that to the picture on the very far right of what you think this person slash creature looked like. I mean, that's a hell of a jump.
Yeah, the reasonable mind is not comfortable with that. Look
No.
at the skin color.
Yeah. How are you getting this? I mean, like, how do you know this thing had that much hair? I mean, there's so many questions I would have for those who put this forward.
Yeah, it fits the narrative that it's the dark-skinned, hairy beast man, and so that's what we get.
Right.
Um, so I've got a few others that we'll talk about. But there is this pygmy village in Indonesia, and they do have these similar skeletons to where it's likely that um, this Lucy skeleton is in fact a pygmy skeleton, and they have pictures of their ancestors with the same physical characteristics. Um, and so
Hmm.
anyway, there's oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but a lot of the supporting evidence for the research I did for this was from Universal Model. It's a couple of science textbooks that Dean Sessions published in the last several years. And his books have been criticized because they were not, you know, I don't know, published by an academic journal, the book itself, or okay, I don't mean that. I mean they'll they'll get you for anything. What I want to say is his book, he's got in blue all of where he's quoting the academic journals. And that
Okay.
thing, it's basically like at least half blue because it's just chock full of the scientists admitting that these these claims aren't all they're added up to be. I mean, evolution, you're really going out on a limb and it's really on its way out. That's the top secret thing about evolution is it is a dying theory and it it'll be gone soon.
What
And
made you
we're
say that?
because more and more scientists are insisting on that.
Hmm. But yet
And
BYU still clinging to it?
so BYU is obsessed with being mainstream. They're obsessed with their accreditation and it's putting them behind
Right.
academically now.
Hmm.
You know, and whether that's from us being historically persecuted people, and so now we're like, hey, we need to make a name for ourselves in the world. We're no longer these creepy guys who follow around this creepy Joseph Smith, believe in all these weird things. We're just normal people, okay? And so I think it's all stems from our obsession with being normal now,
Right.
which is, and of course you've got, big people in the church saying that I don't have the quote in front of me, but the church is getting known for exactly the opposite reasons that it was known for originally. And they're praising that as a good thing.
I'm going to say something else here. And this will most likely piss off a ton of people I know. But
That's why we like your show.
what's that?
That's why we like your show, Dave.
Stop. Stop trying to fit in, right? Just stop. It's never going to work. The Lord set us up to be a peculiar people. Okay. Next, stop pining over the label of Christian. Just
Right.
stop. Okay. There's no reason for it. You know what? If you want a good look at what Christianity looks like, go to the Deep South. Okay. It's riddled with problems. Be proud to wear that moniker of Mormon or Latter-day Saint or whatever flavor of that you want, but stop pining for these things because all we're doing is we're short-circuiting the message of Joseph Smith and the Restoration. Just be done. Stop worrying about what the hell everybody else thinks. It does not matter. Not one bit. What matters is what the Lord thinks of you. And if you're going down this road to be, quote, accepted, knock it off. We're not supposed to be accepted. We're supposed to be change agents within the society. And the more we seek to become like the rest of society, the less chance we have to be those change agents. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. There is, we want to make a name for Christ in the world and we want to show the world how Christianity is really done, right? But it's not going to be by us marching around and just going back to how the world thinks Christianity should be done.
Right.
That was never the mission of the restoration. The
Nope.
restoration is about being different.
Yep.
Okay, so let me just quickly go over a few more frauds. Piltdown Man was the jawbone of an orangutan with fragments of a modern human skull. It was praised as the missing link for 40 years before it was discovered, and there are over 500 academic journal articles showing how awesome it was.
And
Okay,
it was later proved to be a hoax.
yeah, you can Wikipedia these things. These are proven hoaxes. So no matter how many times we prove that there are all these hoaxes and literally lies holding up this theory, you can react to that however you want. Just don't get rid of evolution theory.
Right.
And that's the same thing that Jamie Jensen's theories of Adam all circle around is, there could be different ways to explain Adam, but one thing has to be true, and that is evolution.
Right.
Can't let go of evolution. You can let go of anything else, but just hold on to that evolution. Evolution is the rock to build your faith on. Because when everything else washes away, evolution shall not wash away. So, okay, the Nebraska man was used as evidence for evolution for a long time. All they had of him was one tooth. They later found that it was the tooth of the pig, a pig.
Wait. Excuse me. They based everything off of one tooth.
One tooth, man.
Well, I guess the science is settled. I guess we can just wrap her up and call her a day.
Yeah, let's just meet together and have a big Bible burning party because we were wasting our time with all that nonsense.
Ugh,
Um, yeah,
nuts.
this picture right here, this is the Nebraska man. This is what that tooth told them.
Jeez.
And
Hilton
and there's his cousin crawling around.
Hilton man. I think I've heard of this. This was the first guy who ever decided to rent out rooms in his cave, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Good. Um, yeah, so the jaw broken, the teeth filed down. Okay, again, 50 years later. Oh, sorry guys. I mean, when your kids have left the church, okay, let me rephrase that because I'm sorry, the audience. Let me say, when your kids don't give a crap about God anymore and they want to piss on everything Mormonism, 50 years later, we'll show them that, oops, the reasons that you were, so angry against all things Mormonism and all things God for, those were hoaxes. I'm sorry. But by then it's too late, man. You
yep.
know, by then they've lived their life. And so it's really tragic. And you go to school and you hear this nonsense, you're not going to hear an alternative. I didn't hear any alternative. Grew up in Utah. You're probably a lot better off to go grow up in the Bible Belt with all their problems than maybe they'll at least tell you that evolution is questionable, and maybe they'll at least tell you there's such a thing as creation science, and tell you there's such a thing as a Bible that disagrees with evolution. Anyway, I'll so let's go on. The enlarged brow ridge. Okay, this is not an uncommon thing. Some people just have a larger brow ridge. So when you see these skulls with these big old brow ridges, okay, another thing is if you use certain muscles, the bones by those muscles can get bigger. And then also if you have a longer lifespan, your brow ridge is going to keep growing. So look at the time before the flood and all that, when the patriarchs were living almost 1,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you think they could have developed slightly different skull shapes
Mate,
over that
yeah.
time? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
especially, given diet and those sorts of things. And this is, I think, a good point to point out, Nate, that it's not like we're a couple of guys on here just completely pissing on science. That's not it, right? What we're saying is that there's a difference between adaptation, which I firmly believe is a thing, right? We see it all the time, um, versus evolution. They are two separate things, and one doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the other.
yeah, for sure. And there's a first presidency statement that says, we don't have a problem with demonstratable science. We just need it to be demonstratable,
Right.
you know? And if it's something that just really proves that Jesus was a fraud, we're not really going to be jumping on that science either,
Right.
because we already have certain facts in place, and we have that knowledge, by the Holy Ghost. And so, and we need to recognize the book of Revelation says the devil has deceived the whole world.
Yep.
It is so possible for a massive deception to go on. Two fun examples are in the Manhattan Project. How many people knew they were building a nuclear bomb housing structure?
Quite a few, right? Because they worked on it, right? There was a
Well,
lot of people that worked on that thing.
they all worked on it, but it was top secret. They weren't
Right.
told what they were building. Um, and then, the war tank. They thought they were building a tank to carry water. That's why they called it a tank. They didn't know what they were doing. It was top secret. So when the powers that be have something they want to push or do, they can do a lot of work without telling what's going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people need to believe that there's not only supernatural good, but there's supernatural evil.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. The supernatural evil powers do have uh they want this is evolution is an extremely effective way to get rid of faith in God.
Yep.
So the irony of Christian evolution is just it's the endless oxymoron. Um, the theory of evolution is only about 200 years old. Think of it. It is a last days theory. This is an apocalyptic theory of doom.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. People who want to ascribe evolution to God, evolution is a brutal, brutal theory, right? It is a theory that is riddled with extinction and destruction on an epic scale. If you're going to espouse that, fine, espouse it, but don't bring God into that mix, because it is a horrible way of looking at human progression throughout time.
Yeah, is that the best God could do?
Right. Right. If that's the best a God could do, why would I follow that God? That makes no sense.
Right. Um, okay, let's do a little bit on elongated skulls. Okay, we know there's customs like Chinese foot binding, African neck stretching. Okay, or they put these weird things, these bands on their heads. Okay, this is this is African cranial deformation. This is a thing. And so when you get these weird skulls, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm saying, can we at least consider that not every weird skull is a monkey man? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
with elongated skulls, you just have to watch the History Channel. They'll tell you they're aliens. I mean, that's fine, you know.
Yeah, there's that too. And when there is these different creatures, like let's say, aliens or different weird creatures, um, those are just different creations. They're not from evolution. Nothing's from evolution. Evolution doesn't work. No matter how long you give, okay? Millions of years, Darwin said he could envision the polar bear becoming a whale over time. Okay. It doesn't work no matter how long you have. And I had someone say to me once, I said, well, we've never observed a species actually change, right? And they said, well, that's not the point. The point is the millions of years. We haven't waited long enough. If you wait the millions of years, then you'll see the species change from dramatic change, right, to something completely different. And the response to that is plain and clear. It is no one has seen it. No one has waited long. We don't have any science labs that have been open for millions of years. Okay. And we'll talk about radiometric dating and all the problems with that. But when you've got you know, when you've got that study, let me know of the watching millions of years. So, in other words, it's not demonstratable science.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, many different kinds of monkeys are a lot of these skeletons too. And they depict them standing upright too. That's another unfair thing they do. Okay, there's a plethora of statements that we could go over. So this one is an anthropologist in the American Museum of Natural History. We have a desire to see the story of bipedalism, meaning going from 4 to 2 legs, as linear progressive thing, but evolution doesn't evolve toward anything. It is a messy affair full of diversity and dead ends. So if evolution doesn't evolve toward anything, why is this what's in the textbooks?
Right.
This is what the kids are getting taught.
Yep.
But the scientists are saying, well, actually, a real understanding of evolution is that things aren't becoming towards anything. They're just kind of all over the place. And what do you know it? We got humans. So we need to change the story that our kids are getting, at least, to reflect this. Because we can prove by the rocks, the fossils, like, bro, show me this progression, this linear progression, and you literally can't do it. And you've
Right.
got people admitting that all over the place. You cannot demonstrate with fossil progression that lower life forms changed into larger life forms.
And not just that, but let's be clear on this. That missing link that everybody talks about, that still hasn't been found.
Yeah, for
To
sure.
our to to science, it is still a theory. That missing link has never been found. Most likely because it doesn't exist. Because if evolution worked like Darwin put forth and later scientists have backed, we should see these stages everywhere. And we just don't. We have different animals, but nothing that would indicate, like you were saying, a progressive march towards something that would resemble a human.
Yeah, and I invite the scoffers who are new to this, the idea that this might not be correct. I invite them to get a copy of Universal Model, Volume 2, go to the evolution chapter, and um, look at the 20-hour version of this conversation and dig into a lot more of the research. It's really the best documented material I've seen on the subject. Another really good one is Earth in the Beginning by Walt Brown. You can get that one free at creationism.org in their downloads area.
Okay.
And then I actually do, for those who want to start seeing a little more details on what universal model textbooks are about, I have lots of summary pamphlets that you can download for free at richardsonstudies.com. God willing, who knows how long that'll be up, but okay. So if you're hearing, oh, what do you mean the fossils don't show linear progression? Okay, wait and see, man, because they don't, and we can't hash it all out. But these are a series. This is a display which was bought by a science museum, bought from Playboy, actually. I don't know. I don't know what they're up to.
Well, Hugh Hefner, he was a hell of a scientist. People forget that while he was in that smoking jacket, he also did science. I'm just saying. I think that that's beyond, um, beyond, beyond.
Endless,
Yeah.
endless experiments in the
Yep.
realm of biology.
Yes. Yes. Hugh Hefner was a hell of a scientist.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. This is just another scientist saying that this arrangement of an orderly procession from short monkey to less short, less monkey, all the way up to man, is a subjective, unscientific scenario.
Mhm.
So this is what I mean when you dig into what is being said. They can't say it all the time, but it is in there. And okay, so let's see here. I'm gonna, okay. Okay, Darwin says he knew that a big challenge to his theory. He says, there's another difficulty more serious. I allude to the manner in which many species in several of the main divisions of the animal kingdom suddenly appear in the lowest known fossiliferous rocks. Okay. Um, so basically, you do find these complex things in lower fossil areas. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because evolution is all about simple to complex, and
Right.
that's a nice theory, but that's not what reality, that's not what the dirt shows. Let's go on. Okay, the human ancestor tree full of gaps. Okay, you can't piece this together. Let's see, there's some more. I'm gonna skip those. Okay, here's a fun point to talk about. And okay, yeah, we're gonna be doing a lot more let's talk quotes. I'm sorry that I can be long-winded, Dave,
You're
but
good. You're doing just fine.
we're gonna get a lot more let's talk as well. And a lot of things that I am talking to, they teach against, like these are responses. I've read the book, you know, I've dug through that thing a lot, and so I anyway, this is all responding to these things. Okay, so this is a bunch of fossils that of animals that have not evolved clearly. Okay, we've got a wasp fossil, some crawdads, and some bacteria that are 45,000 generations later. They're still bacteria. The humans, I think it was 20, yeah, just 2,000. So they say the human species changed in 2,000 generations, yet we have bacteria 45,000 later. Why haven't they evolved
Right.
into a new species, right? But they're still right there. Um, okay, another fun point is there was a comedian who, I think it was, is Chris Rock a comedian?
Yes.
Okay, I think he was the one doing it. He was talking about evolution, and he says, "Why, if we evolved from monkeys, why do we still have monkeys walking around? Are they all the retarded monkeys?" You know.
That's awesome.
So you have to go look up Chris Rock and see that. But another thing about this is where's all the cat dogs? So if we all evolved from a common ancestor and then we sprouted out, there would be an extremely astronomical amount of diversity beyond what we have right now. Right now, I can go outside and I can tell you pretty easily what's a cat and what's a dog.
Right.
But if evolution were the case, you'd have about 3,000 species of cat dogs to where you would not know where the cat starts and where the dog ends and all that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So this is the fact that we have very specific, very different animal species is a big evidence that these were not coming from a common ancestor.
Right.
Okay, I talked about that already. If we talked about how, you know, atheist William Craig says evolution gets rid of the first man. And something that we've seen in science over and over is if you can prove something without a certain variable, that variable is probably obsolete. It doesn't even exist. For example, Davy showed that caloric is not a thing. They thought heat was this like flowing substance. We know heat now is the movement of particles, but before then they thought heat was its own element. But then Davy showed, look, I don't need that element. I can rub two ice blocks together and make heat. That element clearly wasn't here before, and now it is because these are melting at an increased rate. So he proved that caloric doesn't exist because you don't need it to explain heat. And then the same thing Lavoisier did with caloric, with phlogiston. They thought there was this basically magical substance in that caused rust, and he was able to make the rust without the magical substance and just demonstrate that it was a reaction of the oxygen in the metal. And so he says, look, phlogiston, we can prove that everything's working without phlogiston. So guess what? Phlogiston probably doesn't exist. Okay, the reason I tell you this is because the evolution theory is doing the exact same thing to religion. They're saying we can prove everything in nature, how it got here, and we can do it all without God. So guess what? God probably doesn't exist. Okay.
Spooky.
Okay. Now, the Latter-day Saints, they are a special people because they have information about how important the family is, that God is a family man. Okay. And we're going to be sensitive as we just briefly discuss this. But if God, you know, we know God is married, and we know children are like the best blessing from God. Okay. It really isn't a stretch to figure out that humans didn't have to evolve.
Right.
Okay. They are the posterity of God. That is special. That is life-changing when you can figure that out.
Right.
When Christianity figures that out, everything's gonna change. Um, we know God has a tangible body of flesh and bones. And we're not one of those churches that says, oh, the fall was from the sin of sex,
Right.
right? We know that God wants marriage to happen. Okay, He wants happiness to happen. He wants children to happen. Um, okay. Um, so another idea of how life got to Earth is that maybe like some kind of germ floated here on an asteroid and started everything off. Well, first off, where did that germ come from? So that's just avoiding the topic of origins. And second off, you'd never make it through space, man. You'd never make it. It's too cold, and the impact and all this.
Okay.
Um, okay, so there's plenty of restoration teachings that Adam's dad was God. Okay. Um, Brigham Young says mankind are here because they are offspring of parents, as in Adam and Eve, who were first brought here from another planet. The power was given them to propagate their species, and they were commanded to multiply and replenish the earth. God created man as we create our children, for there's no other process of creation in heaven, on the earth, in the earth, or under the earth, or in all the eternities that is, that was, or that ever will be. We are flesh of God's flesh and bone of his bone. Okay.
Whew.
Now, if you're some kind of weirdo that doesn't like Brigham Young, let's hear what Joseph Smith said. Okay. Hiram Andrus, a Joseph Smith scholar, taught that God was the great head of human procreation, and it was truly the father of both our spirits and our physical bodies. And I think that's somewhere in either the Follett or the Grove or something. It's probably not too hard to see where he got that from.
Right.
I just don't have it with me right now. Joseph F. Smith. Okay, man was born of a woman. Christ the Savior was born of a woman. God the Father was born of a woman. Adam, our Adam, our earthly parent, was also born of a woman into this world, the same as Jesus and you and I. Basically, if you've got, you know, a human, it came from a woman.
Yep.
Okay, and
Whoa, whoa, whoa. They're called birthing people now, Nate.
oh yeah, that's
Get
right. I
get
forgot.
get your terminology right. Jeez.
Oh man. Um, let's see. Okay, so one of the things that the Let's Talk book does is it is a partial quote, this Elder Holland quote, where Elder Holland really is talking against evolution, but they put it in here into their book probably to just say, look, I covered my ground, I talked about that, I proved that because I talked about it, that it's not against my theory. It's one of those double think things.
Right.
Same when they have to mention the first presidency statements in their book. So look what Holland says. He says it's uncommon as it is unfashionable to speak of Adam and Eve or the Garden of Eden or a fortunate fall into mortality. We can't fully comprehend the atonement until we appreciate that there was an actual Adam and Eve who fell from an actual Eden with all the consequences that fall carried with it. Okay. Now he does play it safe to his evolution audience, and he says here, I do not know the details of what happened on this planet before that. But I do know, okay, so that was his little disclaimer that, people weren't gonna get out their pitchforks right then and kill him on the spot. And he
Mhm.
goes on, these two were created under the divine hand of God. For a time they lived in a paradisical setting where there was neither human death nor future family. Okay, but through choices, they transgressed the commandment, making them leave the garden and allow them to have children before they face physical death. So the clear reality is that there was no death before the fall. That's 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 22. And the Book of Mormon says everything that was created would have remained in the same state after which it was created. Does that sound
Mhm.
like evolution to you?
No.
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 Remaining in the same state you were created in, everything. This isn't just about humans. This is
Right.
about everything, the animals, everything.
Right.
So, so at the end of the day, this Holland statement is is clearly saying that there was an actual Adam and Eve. And like I said, a lot of the evolutionists, they're like, nah, there's no, Adam was just this premortal mythology. this spirit, if anything, and the Eden is just a symbol of pre-mortality coming into mortality. No, it's not. It was there was a dude named Adam and a woman named Eve, and they had bodies of flesh and bone, and they were on this planet, this uh, physical planet, and that's what we're saying here, is that all this is real. You know, we can't just be this Protestant church that says the Bible is this mythological, symbolic thing. Like, we got some real stuff happening in the restoration. Okay, let's go on from that. Okay. Um, okay, there's that verse. Okay, this is a really good book if you want to get into this, by Clark A. Peterson, Using the Book of Mormon to Combat the Falsehoods of Inorganic Evolution. And I think, yeah, President Benson definitely talked about how we need to use the Book of Mormon to refute the false theories of our time. And you can do that with the Book of Mormon and evolution repeatedly. Okay, there's dozens of ways you can do that with the Book of Mormon. Unless you have this extremely surface level belief in the scriptures to where only thing you really get out of your scriptures is Jesus is my savior. That's it. Anything else goes, right? Like, I got two foundations in life. Jesus is my savior and evolution is how I got here. Okay,
Right.
if those are like two big hitters of your worldview, that's not how the restoration is. The restoration goes way deeper than that. And but it seems like those are the two pillars that everybody's clinging to right now, and everybody's having a faith crisis because those two pillars are battling each other. Okay, so somebody asked Harold B. Lee about pre-Adamic people. He quoted Moses 3:7 that God uh, created the man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul, the first flesh on the earth, the first man also. Okay. And let me just say, people are like, oh, God made Adam from the dust. That means Adam evolved from the dust. Okay, that's a huge jump in logic. Okay. Not only that, but you have multiple prophetic teachings about how this is one location where Revelation has told us that was a symbolic thing to
Okay.
describe the rich.
Let me push back here a little bit,
Okay, go ahead.
because here I think this is going to be an important dichotomy. We just read Brigham Young that said Adam was brought here from another world, right?
Uh-huh.
What does Harold B. Lee say?
Well,
This is
uh,
part of the problem. Do you see what I'm saying here? Is that we're getting conflicting reports, so to speak, right? And this leaves people in a position to where they feel like they have to grasp at other alternatives because this conflicts, right? And Brigham Young talks about some, not all, but part of the creation account in the Old Testament as being an allegory. That was in the temple for a long time. And so some of this, I think, I really do believe Mormonism hold the answer to all of these things, but we have to be willing to go back far enough to find it, Nate.
okay.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Do you see where I'm coming
I'm
from here?
yeah, I'm willing to, go with the Adam was brought here that Brigham said. And um in this um in this scripture in Moses 3 verse 7, okay, it says, because he's quoting this in his defense of no,
Right,
there's not pre-Adamic people. Okay, but after the next line it says, and man became a living soul, the first flesh upon the earth, the first man also. Okay, so you say it's the first man, and like, yeah, he was the first man. Everyone before him was a monkey man. It's like, no, those were, by for all intents and purposes, those were, if they existed, those were men too. Like, if your dad was, um, if you're a man, your dad was a man, right?
right,
Um, and then if you go later in the book of Moses, I didn't put this in here, but it talks about how you and me were born of the dust. So clearly, this of the dust phrase doesn't mean made from an adobe. It doesn't
right,
mean made from evolution. It means that we're living in a telestial world and our bodies are telestial bodies,
right.
right? We're of this world. This is the situation we got. And I know you're You know a lot about that. Um,
I feel
and it's
like
pretty
some of this
interesting.
comes because we've dumbed down the gospel a little bit, to be honest with you. Right?
Absolutely.
We need to just embrace this and run with it because I do think that the actual science is on our side.
The actual science is on our side. We've dumbed things down in the church. You no longer have gospel doctrine class. You now have gospel therapy class. You're no longer allowed to,
I
you know,
haven't heard that. But I also
yeah,
want to be fair, Nate. This isn't just an LDS problem, right? I see this in some of the fundamentalist circles I run in, right? This is a Mormon problem. This is not an exclusively LDS problem. I want to make that clear. But the criticism I level here is at Mormonism at large, not just one faction of it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, if we had our hardcore, awesome higher revelations, we could say you answer the pre-Adamic question by saying, ain't no pre-Adamic because Adam showed up from another earth and that's how we got our people here. And my thing is the scripture says Adam was a son of God. And so either here or there, Adam's dad is God.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's different ways of looking at that, but at the end of the day, it's humans are divine. They're from
Right.
above, not from below.
Absolutely.
And so anyway, let's go on past this. Okay, there's like 50 pages of quotes where the apostles over the years have just tried to say you can't do evolution and Christianity. They don't work together. Especially not restoration Christianity. I heard somebody the other day was like, well, there's just okay. In the Let's Talk Science and Religion book, there is a part where they say there's varying views of church leaders over time. Okay. They really make a point of that, oh, well, some church leaders believe in evolution. Okay. But we got to break that down for a second because that is very misleading because 99% of all church teachings have been against evolution when it's this topic of creation and evolution. Okay. And no apostles or presidents have taught anything suggesting evolution from a general conference pulpit. There's been two apostles, Talmage and Woodsoe, who have been open to evolution and taught evolution, but they didn't ever teach it over the pulpit. And how can you say that just those guys, that represents evolving views of church leaders over time?
Right.
President McKay was a little soft on it. And then people like to throw in Henry Eyring Sr. Okay. I guess you can throw him in there too. He wasn't an apostle or anything, but so anyway, it just doesn't accurately represent church history and even modern church history to say evolving views of church leaders over time. We've got at least 4 quotes of President Russell Nelson that he's like, guys, evolution, there's no chance. Okay. And I'll read some of those later. McConkie was a big hitter on this. He says evolution is diametrically opposed
Right.
to our doctrine. So he's a really fun one to read on this. Okay. And let's talk about science and religion. They say, quote, all living things on earth, both plants and animals, share a common ancestor, close quote. Okay.
Mm.
So make no mistakes about their claim. Okay, here's your favorite one.
There's my favorite one. Let me just move this out of the way so people can see. SpongeBob versus the father. Who's your daddy?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That one's awesome. You need to
Yeah.
put that one on a t-shirt. That's all I'm going to say. I know a place where you could just put it on, and put that thing up for sale. I'll back your sale on
Dude,
that. Let's
I'm
do
gonna
that.
do that. I'm gonna
I
do
like
that.
this.
Yep. So did you come from lower life forms or from higher life forms? That's the
Right.
question. Um, so okay, we're all confused. This book is confusing us. Please stop trying to brainwash us. Please stop trying to, and I say brainwash with all reverence because you're not bringing up the other side. In this book on science and religion, you didn't bring up all the quotes, all the teachings of the prophets on this. You didn't bring up all the um you wanted to, they quote Brigham Young once. They say, well, Brigham Young said we should embrace all knowledge. It's like, okay, whoop-de-doo. Guess what else Brigham Young said? He said evolution's of the devil.
Right.
So you're gonna put that in your book too while you're at it? Just quoting Brigham Young. Like I call that taking someone out of context.
Yep.
It's like if I was someone who believed in slavery and I said, you know, I like spending time with my slaves. I like spending time with people. In an abolitionist book, you're gonna hold me up as the most amazing abolitionist because I said I like spending time with people. Well, no, that's not okay. Now let me be very clear. I don't like slavery. Okay, that's not what I was trying to say. But they're clearly taking Brigham out of context.
Right.
Um, Michael Brew is professor of philosophy and zoology, University of Guelph, says evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. Evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it is true of evolution still today.
Yep.
The dangerous thing about this religion is that it's a state-supported religion.
Yep.
Okay, our tax dollars are funding evolution like crazy. Okay, and money corrupts, and so people are hanging to it because that's where all the money is.
Yep.
And if your kids are going to public school, your taxes are paying for them to, well, your taxes are paying for evolution, like it or not, right? Because you pay taxes. But you send your kids to school, they're going to be preached this religion all day. It's funny because they say the schools and the state, unless they can't promote morality, hogwash. It's one of the persons of state government is to have promote decent morality.
Yep.
You know, so and they're promoting their morality. Just anything but our morality is allowed.
Absolutely.
Something important that Benson contributed to this is that he specifically named Darwin as an antichrist. Okay.
Good for him.
This is in his Strengthening the Family General Conference, 1970. He says, okay, as a watchman on the tower, I warn you, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Expose deceptions from men like Freud, Darwin, Dewey, Marx, and Keynes, and others. Okay, he says today there are much worse things that can happen to a child than not getting a full college education. In fact, some of the worst things have happened to our children while attending colleges, led by administrators who wink at subversion. Okay, so make no mistake. I mean, this is the funny part: are we to thank this Antichrist, Darwin, for giving us the cornerstone of how God creates?
You know, I think it's worth pointing out here. I'd heard, I probably should fact check this and then if I'm wrong, take it out. But it's my understanding Darwin didn't believe his own theory at the time of his death.
I don't know.
And if
He,
that's the case, there are some issues there that we need to think about.
yeah. Well, I guess deathbed repentance
Is
is
a
a
thing. Yeah.
in some ways. I mean, the person can change their mind, but he spent his whole life promoting it, and
Yep.
his personal character went downhill even worse and worse and worse. He couldn't get along with his wife, who was a Christian, and he he couldn't enjoy nature. He didn't like music anymore. He didn't, uh, poetry and art and music. They disgusted him, and seeing beautiful animals made him want to puke. Like this guy got really messed up
Right.
because I don't know how far he took it, right? But
Yeah.
he took it far enough to where he got us all messed up and he got himself all messed up.
I was mistaken. I just fact checked it, and Darwin did believe in evolution at the time of his death. So,
Okay. When you see these trees, when you see these trees, they're called phylogenetic tree of life. They've got all the modern species on the outer ring. And then as you go in, they're branching together and together to get to the single common ancestor. But you notice that these inner levels don't have labels, and
yep.
that's because we've not discovered them. Okay, so don't let anybody tell you that we have the missing links and we can identify all these turns in the tree. This is a hypothesis of assumed events, and that's what the scientists are saying. Okay.
And see, this is nuts because all those inner branches, like you
Yeah.
have to do make some serious assumptions that those branches did what you're showing them to do,
Yeah.
right? It's just it's not science, it's a theory, right? And they laugh at us for believing in our God that that created man by divine origin, but their theory holds less water than that.
Yeah, I mean, what's easier to believe, that nothing created everything or that an intelligent person created everything?
Right.
Um, and you mentioned that why do we have to make these mental leaps to say that everything goes back to this single ancestor? And I think it's because they have nowhere else to go. If
Right.
they're completely unwilling to acknowledge that there's a creator, then evolution's all they got. I mean,
Right.
um, so they're gonna push it all there. They say, well, clearly it wasn't God, so it has to be this. And another thing is the word theory. Okay, they're gonna have a hissy fit whenever whenever we say, oh, it's just a theory, because they say, oh, well, theories today, they are extremely important and they're demonstrated by endless experiments and stuff. Okay, it is hype, and they do bring it up in this Let's Talk book, all this defense, because they think somehow that's going to make evolution look good if they can defend the word theory. Okay, at the end of the day, a theory is meant to explain a law. Laws still are higher things in modern science. Okay, so the question you have to ask is, what laws are the theory of evolution explaining? And
Right.
it's not explaining any observed laws. And so it is appropriate to criticize evolution, to remind people that this is theoretical and that the word theory in that sense is fitting.
Right. No, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, here's this professor, molecular biologist, Dalhousie University, says the rooting of the universal tree is hopelessly compromised.
Huh.
Okay. The geologic column is supposedly these layers that we find, right?
Right.
You've got multiple scientists. Okay, and here I'm giving you a drop in the bucket of all the scientists that are disagreeing with this. Okay,
Okay.
he says they're basically building this on correlation, and the in this geology textbook it says, quote, without the theory of evolution and interdisciplinary science of paleontology, it could not exist, close quote.
Hmm.
That's a fancy way of saying evolution theory is what built the column. The column
Right.
didn't build evolution theory.
Right.
Um, okay. The Let's Talk book says humans and animals hint at an evolutionary past. Okay. Again, we already talked about a lot of that. Let's go through some of that. Another thing is that you will find dinosaur fossils that do appear with modern animals too, and um, they don't show that in a museum though, right? They won't show modern animals with dinosaurs because they don't want you to
Right.
think they coexisted, but they did coexist. And we even have fossil footprints with human footprints uh, inlaid in and next to and so forth. Okay. When you're naturally breeding, we touched on this a little bit, but when you leave let's say you breed this exotic dog or this exotic bird, when you leave it alone in nature, it's going to naturally, uh, over generations, it's going to naturally revert back to its natural stock.
Right.
So much for turning into something totally different. The opposite
Right.
happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Same with dogs, right? We've never bred a dog into a non-dog over thousands of years. The moth experiment was a hoax. They glued those dead moths onto a log and
Huh.
tried to say they were evolving based on the mine. Um, okay, here's President Nelson. He says, it's incomprehensible. Okay, he says, to think that man evolved from one species to another is to me incomprehensible. Man has always been man, dogs have always been dogs, monkeys have always been monkeys. It's just the way genetics works. And then again, Nelson says, some people erroneously think that these marvelous physical attributes happened by chance, resulted from a big bang somewhere. Ask yourself, could an explosion of printing shop produce a dictionary? Okay, so long story short, Nelson is saying Big Bang evolution doesn't work, or in other words, cosmic evolution, and biological evolution doesn't work. Okay,
Right.
so, and here's a good question. If this book is sold at Deseret Book and President Nelson is the president of the church, that owns this bookstore, don't you think it would have been nice to throw in some of his quotes
Right.
on this topic?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
The most they do is they mention how Nelson dedicated the new life science building at BYU, and how Nelson said this will be a great place to like do science or something like that, very basic.
Right.
But it's like, uh, okay, let's just avoid his comments that are actually. It's another thing that's another way that, just like how they misrepresented Brigham, they misrepresent President Nelson by
Yeah.
making it look like Nelson endorses evolution when he clearly doesn't.
Right. Right. Nate,
Uh,
let me stop you right there real quick. I got to
okay,
take a quick break and then I'll come right back.
okay, yeah, good. All right. So this is how scientists say that evolution is they call it evolutionary biology. They say is a historical science, meaning they don't need to do things like they say laws and experiments are inappropriate. Okay.
Wait, wait. So they're like literally throwing out the scientific method. We don't need to do experiments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
This he's getting this prize from the Royal Swedish Academy of Science, and he's literally saying we're throwing out the scientific method. So much for them blaming us for throwing out the scientific method.
Right.
And the irony is, you can use laws and experiments in a laboratory to demonstrate whether or not evolution happened. For example, we can make oil, okay, in a lab. We can make coal that identically represent that it's the same as coal that you'd mine. Okay, it's more expensive, and so we don't do that. It's cheaper to just dig it up, but we can do that now. Um, Another thing, and guess what? Does it take us millions of years to form those oils? No, obviously not. And they talk about the articles that showed these things. We need to put two and two together and say, gosh, if it doesn't take millions of years to explain the geology of the earth, and it doesn't take millions of years to explain the biology of the earth, in all likelihood, the millions of years probably doesn't exist.
Right.
Just like those great pioneer scientists that took us so far by demonstrating and getting rid of all the nonsense, all the witchcraft science, and just getting us the, and that's another thing that the Bible doesn't get the credit either. Before the Bible was around and before, Christianity, people just thought nature was this random thing. Nobody can predict it. You can't measure it and explain it. There's all these different gods that are controlling, the god of the river, the god of the clouds, the god of the dirt. But then the Christians come around and we've got this Bible that says, guess what? There's one God that made everything. And he did it in a predictable, organized way. And so now we can take that and we can say, okay, I'm going to prove it. And so really, when you can prove laws of nature, you're proving the Christian God right there. You see that?
Right.
And so Christianity is what we have to thank for the scientific method and the idea that such a reliable nature exists in the first place.
Right. You, I think this is a good spot to just show the irony, right? Nate, when you go to buy a new car, a brand new car, right off the factory floor, what is the state of that car?
Really nice.
Perfect, right? With the exception of somebody who put it, together wrong. We'll say everybody did everything just right. There's no scratches, there's no dings, there's no dents. It's functioning at its optimal level. And then over time, what happens to that car? It
Yeah,
breaks
it's
down,
worse. Yeah.
gets worse, right? Even the human body to a degree, right? When a child is first born, for the most part, right? Obvious exceptions, but for the most part, the child's got no scars, no bumps. But the second that child breathes oxygen, the clock starts, right? It even starts before that, but it really starts once that child takes his first breath. and he starts to deteriorate in some way, right? Now he matures along the way, but still the body begins to break down. And it's that way with everything, right? Homes, houses, they start out really good, brand new construction. And then over time, it starts to settle. The foundation gets cracked. Evolution is the only thing that works in the opposite of that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. Things are getting worse, not better. Um, yeah, another good analogy is if you're going to start a university, you're going to put a bunch of animals there to make it work, or you're going to find some extremely intelligent people
Right.
and they're going to start it, right? So, okay, a big talking point in this book was, is this a reptile becoming a bird? Like, is this the transition right here? Have we captured it in the fossil record that reptiles became birds? Because
Right.
that's what they say, right? In evolution, they call this the Archaeopteryx. And okay, they say this is okay, let's take one more look at it. Okay, it's got some claws at the end of its wings, and you can't see it here, but it's got some little teeth in its mouth. Okay, so like claws and teeth. Oh my goodness, that sounds like a reptile. Okay, yet it's clearly a bird. Look at those feathers.
Right.
Okay, so let's not forget that the ostrich has claws on its wings. There are many birds that have claws at the end of its wings, and there are even birds that have teeth. Okay, and this in this Introduction to Evolution textbook, this guy admits, he says, the extinct ancient birds had teeth, and every other category of vertebrates contains some organisms with teeth and some without. Amphibians, reptiles, extinct birds, mammals, etc. So we can't use the fact that this Archaeopteryx fossil perhaps had teeth to say that it's a transition between the one to the other, because each different class does have its own, um,
Right.
it can have those. Um, okay, we've got these other birds with claws. Okay, um, just for time's sake, we also don't have scales becoming feathers. There's no transitional scale becoming a feather. They don't have a clue how we got feathers. And at the end of the day, God is creative. He can make some weird birds. Okay,
Right.
another example is the platypus. Okay, platypus, just weird, right? Um,
Poisonous spur
yeah,
lays eggs, but has a pouch, a beaver tail, a duck bill, webbed feet. I mean, it's
yeah, it's
Robin
the
Williams had
bonanza.
a great bit about this where he said it's like God just kind of threw together all the leftover parts and pieces, and
Yeah,
that was the platypus.
yeah. Um, so God's creative, he can do this if he wants. And I bet there's other worlds that have other animals we're totally not familiar with. And actually the scripture even says there's different kinds of animals that we are not familiar with in heaven too. Um, the diversity is the important part. Um, so we have our little categories of, oh, this is a reptile, this is a mammal, and we think we figured it all out, but God throws us a curveball every here and there. So long story short is this supposed thing they point to in their book, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we also don't have bird evolution fossils showing the bird evolving. Okay. This biology of birds textbook says the origin of birds is largely a matter of deduction. There is no fossil evidence of the stages through which the remarkable change from reptile to bird was achieved. Um,
It's one of the only times where they'll take the lack of evidence and then form a hypothesis around that.
that is very well put. Lack of evidence formed a hypothesis around that. This other in the science news, um, admits that it is obvious that we must now look for the ancestors of the flying birds in a period of time much older than what Archaeopteryx lived. And this is another great point, is they're always giving themselves more time. You notice
Right.
that?
Yep.
They're always saying, oh, the Earth is 1 million years old. Oh, actually, it's 10 million. Oh, actually, it's a billion. Oh, wait, it just keeps getting older. They also have found that they have bird fossils below where they found Archaeopteryx, which is another smoking gun that this isn't something that happened before birds even came on the scene.
Okay.
Isn't a transitioning. And yet it's this flagship of evolution teaching. Archaeopteryx, Archaeopteryx, you know. Okay, another thing they say, that there's similar structures, okay? They say the similarities in, this is Let's Talk book, the similarities in body structure of humans and animals hit in an evolutionary past. So you look at these things, okay? You got the dog leg, the horse leg, the man's arm, the bat's arm, the penguin's arm, okay? And gosh, you know, they look pretty different to me.
Right.
Um, I mean, really, even if there's some similarities, they're really different.
Yep.
If you were to show me, you know, here's my arm and here's my cat's arm, like, gosh, I just know those had a common ancestor. It, it's just ridiculous.
Right.
The thing is the common creator. Yeah, the creator can use a few similar patterns, right? The point is not that there's a few similarities. The point is that there are dramatic differences. Okay. If you just want to go off of similarities, well, me and that vacuum cleaner over there, we have a common ancestor because it has a 20-foot cord, and I have an intestine that also looks like a cord.
Right.
Yeah.
I see where you're going here. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yep. So if we want to play that similarities game, any trace of a similarity means we have a common ancestor, then, you know, uh, me and my cell phone have a common ancestor because we both emit heat, you
Right.
know?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, and there's more crazy examples of that scientists have actually, you know, concluded that, oh, we must have been direct offspring from octopus because the eyes of the octopus and the human are so similar. Or, you know, there's just so many weird things. Okay. The Dark Ages, the rat disease only affected people and Norway rats. So maybe instead of coming from the monkey, maybe we were from the rat. Maybe that's the more close thing, right? Maybe this giant rat thing turned in, maybe the rat man. How about this? How about the Batman? Okay. Maybe it was a Batman. So I got to say to that, show me the Batman.
Right.
Okay. Let me see it. And then we can talk about that. Um, so they'll go on and on. Okay. Um, you before I forget this, you mentioned like for the platypus, taking all the junk left over and boom, there's the platypus. There are actually some things going around on that line where they'll say we have all this junk DNA that proves that we are like basically this trash heap thing that basically became what it is because we got all this DNA in us that's junk. Okay, the
Ooh.
whole junk DNA thing, man, it's going out the window. That is no longer good science. They're finding that, oh crap, we thought that wasn't useful, but it is. The same thing with appendages. Oh, you don't need your appendix, or you know, you don't need your tailbone, or the whale doesn't need his pelvis, or you know, all these things. Yeah, you sure do actually. You know, some of these snakes that have the little tiny claws sticking off their sides, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
they need those. Those are for attachment to mate. Same with the whale pelvis. That's important for reproduction. Okay. And so all these things that they thought were not necessary are actually quite necessary. So God didn't mess up on us, and He didn't even mess up on His animals. Okay.
Right.
Um, okay, let's go past this. Okay, and they're also claiming that whenever they find something that's not homologous, they call it de novo out of nothing genetics. Okay, this should ring a bell in the restoration because Joseph Smith said creation was not what's the word I'm looking
Ex
for?
nihilo.
Yeah, ex nihilo. That God didn't make things out of nothing. And here, um, when the DNA evolutionists are stumped and they say, "Where did this evolve from? Nobody else has this. Where'd it come from?" They say, well, let's just make a new term. It's de novo evolution. Okay. And that's the thing is whenever the evolutionists get stumped, they make up a new term. And all of a sudden, all the problems are solved. Nothing to see here, folks.
Well, and de novo means out of nothing, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying there?
yeah.
Okay. Mormons don't even believe in ex nihilo, right? We believe in
No.
matter unorganized that becomes organized. Okay.
Mhm.
What's a bigger stretch that somehow this DNA just pops up out of nowhere, that it just all of a sudden is, or that there was a divine creator who put everything together?
Yep. Okay. They do play the evolution card pretty hard. They say because all life on Earth, including humans, read DNA the same way, this is strong evidence that we all shared a common beginning. Okay. Here's another giant leap in logic. Because we read DNA the same way, we have the same beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense. Again, it's same programmer. Okay.
Yep.
Writing with the same code.
Absolutely.
Um, okay. Again, DNA doesn't isn't great for evolution. Okay. Um, there's dramatic differences that are unaccountable. You can't account for. Um, and when you talk about the math statistics, they're always kind of, like when Joe Biden's saying something like, "Oh, Mr. President, you can't say that, sir." Or he gets that little talking bug in the mic, right? He's like, "Mr. President, you can't say that." So in evolution, it's the mathematicians, the statisticians are like, no, you can't claim that. Biologists, no, you can't do it. Um, because these things that they say can happen, even for one gene to evolve, it's going to take way longer than 14 billion years. It's going to take an untold amount of time that is simply not available by anyone's reasoning. And,
Mhm.
they keep making it longer because they have to, but the longer they make it, the more we're like, man, are you sure? Are you sure you can do
Right.
that? Um, okay. There's obvious limits. Okay. Um, okay. Mitochondrial Eve. Okay. In this journal, um, tree. If molecular evolution were really neutral at these sites, a high mutation rate would indicate that Eve lived about 6,500 years ago, a figure clearly incompatible with current theories on human origins. Okay.
Hmm.
So if you want just a common ancestor of all the humans, you only need about 6,000 years. Okay.
Wow.
Um, okay, they say, yeah, we talked about this. Let's talk. They claim that animals and people have evolutionary leftovers. Okay, we already talked about that. You actually need that stuff. There was a time evolutionists listed 180 structures in the human body that were vestigial, or in other words, unnecessary. That's been proven wrong, for sure. Okay, this one's my favorite part. They say human embryos have gills and tails. Okay, they're claiming in this book, Deseret Book, to get all the saints to dramatically rearrange their religion because human embryos have gills and tails, and somehow that proves that we evolved, and so evolution is the fact of the matter. Okay, but we're going to show that humans embryos do in fact not have gills and they do not have tails. Um, this isn't even good science anymore. You won't find mainstream scientists like promoting the gills and tails story anymore.
Hmm.
Um, this is just some kind of weird thing that the authors, I guess, forgot was outdated science and they put it in their book. So, okay, let's look at these gills. Okay, are these little gills? In other words, what does a gill do?
Breathes underwater, right?
It's how you breathe in fluid. And so, is this how humans breathe? These little pouches right here? Okay. The answer is no. There's no oxygen going in and out of lungs. There's no breathing going on. In other words, this is not a fish. It does not need oxygen to be pulled out of the surrounding environment through gill slits. Okay. There are no slits for anything to come in and out of. There are no openings. Okay. These are throat pouches. Okay. These turn into glands. Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, let's look at the tail. Okay. So like I said, these turn into the thymus gland, the parathyroids, the middle ear canals. Okay. The tail. What are tails for? let's talk about fish. What is a fish tail for?
For propelling itself through the water.
Right. And is this embryo here propelling itself through the water through this
No,
tail?
no.
Okay, so it's not a tail. All right. Okay, this is what turns into the coccyx, which is for muscle attachment. Okay. Again, they call it the tailbone, right? That
Right.
humans used to have tails. Okay. No, humans didn't used to have tails. This is just for muscle attachment. Okay.
Okay.
So, okay. And yeah. Darwin's guy, Haeckel, he changed when he was doing his famous embryo hoax drawings. He changed the sizes of heads and eyes and trunks. He did the same embellishments with his ape drawings. He showed the apes as standing upright, and things like that. And he got in a lot of trouble for that, but his stuff lives on. Okay, one that we do, of course, need to address is the radiometric dating, right? They call this absolute dating because because of they say there's relative dating, which is what's stacked on top of what, and then there's absolute dating, which is this laboratory test of how old things are, right? Burning the carbons and seeing how much radioactive half-life has occurred. Okay. So they're saying, yep, this is how we know the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Yep. This is how we know 3.4 billion years ago life showed up. I notice they're doing it again here with giving themselves more time. Living things began to appear at least by 1.9 billion, possibly even before 3.6 billion. It's like, okay, thank you for those precise figures. I'm so glad that I read your book and now I know exactly how many billions, how many tens of billions of years old life started showing up. It's like, that's a pretty big margin of error, man. 1.9 billion to 3.6 billion. Like, I'll get it's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay. Obviously, this is another thing where the theory came before the science.
Mhm.
Okay. Darwin says, for my theory to work, you need an it's unavoidable. Okay, I'll just read, I guess. I'm having a hard time. The belief that species are immutable, unchangeable productions was almost unavoidable as long as the history of the world was thought to be of short duration. Close quote. That's from Origin of Species. Okay. In other words, it's obvious that species aren't going to change,
Right.
especially when you understand that the Earth is not old. When
Right.
they throw in their old Earth, that's when they get their well, I guess it could have happened if I waited around long enough. Sure, I guess.
Right.
Eventually, maybe. And they're like, ah, see, I got you. I got you. You admitted that maybe. And this is another thing where if we can demonstrate, you know, ages of rocks and this and that without radiometric dating, and we can show that radiometric dating is broken, this is another thing that we're holding on to, frankly, that we don't need to hold on to, the old Earth. And um, so in my opinion is that we have enough science to demonstrate that the Earth is just what the Doctrine and Covenants said. It has a 7,000 temporal year lifespan, and the creation is just what it said. It was a 7-day creation. Okay, now my opinion is that those 7 days were God's days, which is 7,000 years. But either way, that's a heck of a lot shorter than the 14 billion, 4 billion.
Sure. I
So.
see where you're coming from on that. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just saying from a scientific perspective and a scriptural perspective, if we don't, okay, let's just talk the science. If you don't, same thing we talked about earlier. If you don't need it to explain nature, it probably doesn't exist. Okay. And we have to realize that this old Earth stuff, it all is from the evolution camp. Okay. And again, guys, this is a bad tree. This is not good. Okay. So a few basic issues with radiometric dating. It's built on unprovable assumptions, like how much carbon was initially present. Did argon and other measurable elements leak in or out through time? Is the decay rate constant, which we've showed on certain scenarios, it is not. Has the atmosphere always been the same? Based on samples of oxygen from amber, there was a higher concentration of oxygen, like 25% higher in the distant past. Things like this. Okay. Have catastrophic events to influence timetables. If geologists won't admit that there was a worldwide flood, they're never going to get it right. They're never going to get it right. Okay. So they're not taking any of these things These are a lot of assumptions. Okay. This is a house of cards, and you can't do it. We can't tell what the weather will be like 1 week from now. And we're assuming all these things based on a consistent environment 1 billion years ago. And I did bring up earlier that yes, there are laws of nature, and God made a predictable universe. But uniformitarian theory of James Hutton from 200 years ago, where he said the processes of today reveal the past, that's not the same thing. What he's saying is there is no allowance for catastrophes. There's no allowance for the flood of Noah. There's no allowance for intelligent life forms putting life here. He says, only what you see is what you get. In other words, absolutely no supernatural allowed.
Hmm.
So it's different. Okay. It's very different. What they were doing, the uniformitarian theory, okay? Because the reality is is much different. Okay. Another really easy way to tell that these radiocarbon datings are not good is because you can take things that you know the age and you test them, and then, oh, it's a bad, okay, let's mouse. Let's say 1 year old tops. They radiocarbon date it from negative 260 to positive 2000 years old. Okay. And then you can take a piece of rock and you can send it in and say, how old is this rock? And they'll say, oh, that rock, sir, is 3 billion years old. I say, okay, thank you very much. And then you take the same rock and you mail it back to him. And sir, how old is this rock? Like, oh, well, that rock is 2 million years old, sir. Thank you very much. And then you just break that rock in half. You send them sample A, and then they'll tell you different. And then you send them sample B, and they'll tell you something different. So another one is the lava flows. Um, when you melt rock, that's when you reset the radiometric clock. That's when you should be able to say, okay, here's some fresh rock, right? 0 years old. And yet we can say this lava flow. Okay, I saw that volcano blow up, and I saw this lava flow 5 years ago. And let's take a sample. That rock was formed because they say, how is the earth formed, right? From a big ball of melted rock, right?
Right.
So if we say, okay, well, that melt I know it was 5 years ago because I saw it. And then they test it and they say, oh, well, that's 39.673 million years. That's how old that rock is. Okay, we know better. So now the same thing's happening with the planet Earth. Okay, and I don't think the Earth did start out as a melted rock because Genesis makes it sound like it was more of a water situation, more like making a soup than making a bomb. But let's just assume that if the Earth was from a big hot ball of magma, big melt, the age when it dried, okay, shouldn't that's when the clock resets, in other words.
Right.
Okay. Okay, when they want to tell us how old the Earth is, they're basing it on when the Earth cooled and solidified. Okay.
Okay.
So that's what's going on here. Okay. Okay, this is going to blow your mind. Okay. Evolutionists admit that if a C14 date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. And if it is completely out of date, we just drop it. Okay.
Just get rid of the inconvenient
Yeah.
part.
It's like evolution is true, therefore, this laboratory test we did must be false.
Right.
They're trading real science for theoretical science.
Right.
Another scientist in the New York Academy of Science, it may come as a shock to some, but fewer than 50% of the radiocarbon dates from geological and archaeological samples in northeastern North America have been adopted as acceptable by investigators.
Ooh.
They're throwing out over 50% because it doesn't match evolution.
Right.
We've got to let go of old Earth. It's bogus science for the intent of destroying the biblical view of creation. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Now,
Not gonna.
hang tight here real quick, because now I'm going to ask you to kind of support this in light of some things that we know of as Mormons, right? One of that being matter unorganized that becomes organized. Okay. So if we're going to say that the earth is only so many years old, we're saying that those materials are only so many years old, correct?
I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. So if that's the case, if God's organizing a world out of existing matter, wouldn't that matter by necessity be older than what we are carbon dating, or older than what we are saying the earth should be if you're a young earth creationist?
Well, the first question is, can you prove it in a lab? And what I'm arguing is that we can't prove it in a lab. That when we've that that the lab is showing something very different, and that when you take like 12 methods of dating based on, shore levels, based on recessions of this and that, based on history, based on all these, um, the wildly, you're getting wildly different answers from different things.
But
So
again,
I don't have the answers
I'm
to your
not trying to
question.
be argumentative. I'm just trying to see how the young earth model could really work here, right? Because again, if the materials God is using to form this world are already in existence, they must be significantly older than the formed world, correct? So my thought being is that if those materials God is using to fashion the earth are unorganized matter, right? Space rocks that are coming together to form an earth, shouldn't we expect to see that they could have some serious antiquity because they are older than the creation periods?
You're assuming that space rocks came together to make the Earth.
Right. 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 As of right, yeah, I am. I'm making that assumption because I would use, using what's, somebody else would say from an old world or a old earth theological standpoint.
Hmm.
Are you not seeing that couldn't hold water for some of those folks? That doesn't that does make sense?
If you're taking big chunks of rocks and putting them together to make a planet, then I guess something like that could work. But I don't think that's how the creation happened at all.
Right.
Again, the creation model of rocks clumping together doesn't work. I mean, when was the last time you were playing pool and you hit the ball to break it to start the game,
Right.
and that ball joined the other balls?
No, I understand that, but again, you're talking about God, right? You're not talking about a billiard player. You're talking about God. And I guess the way I look at it, right, when the Lord says matter unorganized, I don't know, maybe I'm just making an assumption here, but I would have thought he would have meant more than just water, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that works. There's some interesting um ideas about element and how element is
Okay.
how that
Sorry, I
how,
wasn't trying to be argumentative.
and
I was just asking some questions here, trying to
yeah,
get
it's a good question. And I don't so since we don't have all the information about how the creation happened, and we do have Joseph saying, first off, we need to super duper verify that he actually did say that the earth is from parent earth. And I'm gonna say let's accept that and let's just assume that, because I don't see any reason why not to. But that's just one of the many things we'll have to do is super verify that. But anyway, since we don't have all the answers about how that happens, and we do have, you know, when you put certain amounts of energy in water, it's called sonoluminescence. It can cause light, and there's some funky things that
sure.
uh, when God talks and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water, like I'm willing to entertain the idea of certain elements actually being made from the existing material. Like, let's say, uh, okay, rather than go down that trail that I'm really not equipped to go down, the point of my discussion here is to say we can't scientifically prove that the Earth is old, and most scientific evidence says it's not old.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting at. Um, yeah,
You see where the conundrum is, though, right?
a little bit. As far as the, I mean, if you want to take it there, why isn't our test showing that rocks are Google quintillion years old?
I'm not saying that the scientists have it right, in their dating, but what I am saying is that I think there's more there's evidence there to suggest that these elements that were used to create the earth are much older than just the 6500 years, and that's based off the scripture, right?
Okay.
Matter and organism.
So, all right, I think I have two ideas on this. One is even if they are much older, that doesn't mean our Earth itself is much older. Would you agree with that?
That's certainly a possibility. Yeah, I'm willing. I'm open to exploring that idea. I mean, our Earth, as it is now constituted, may not be that old. There is some interesting stuff though, where Joseph talks about the definition of a world, though, too, right? Where he's in Nauvoo, he talks to, and I can't remember. I'll post the link to this though when I post this, where Joseph basically says, the definition of a world is an inhabited planet, so to speak, right? And that has some interesting ideas that could be drawn from that. I guess what I'm saying is that I see and feel your passion, and I agree with you on 99%, but I think we could be just as guilty of saying, nope, it's got to be this, but we don't really have any more concrete answers than the old Earth creation guys.
Okay, so let me uh read this DNC 77.
Okay.
It says, okay, um, the uh this earth during the 7,000 years of its continuance or temporal existence. So God limits it to 7,000 years of temporal existence. And then he says, down in verse 12, he says, as God made the world in 6 days. In other words, before those 6 days, was there a world? No,
Before those 6 days? No,
no.
there was matter
Okay,
unorganized. Yep.
okay. So this earth, okay, it was made at that time. And on the seventh day, he finished his work and sanctified it, and also formed man out of the dust of the earth. Even so, in the beginning of the 7,000 years, Lord God will sanctify the earth. So whatever was floating around or whatever was used, the point is, this earth did not exist before the 6 days of creation.
I don't think that's what that says, though, right? It says that it was, he rested at that 7,000 years, and we don't know how long Adam and Eve were in the garden, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what was happening outside the garden either, right?
Uh-huh.
You see what I'm saying? There, I don't think it's as open and shut as what we'd all like. I would love it if it was, right? And this is why I tend to put this more in the context of an idea, right? And one worth exploring. But this whole idea of young Earth versus old Earth, I can kind of see both sides of this argument here.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I think there's evidence on both sides that I think needs to be weighed in
Okay,
the
sure.
bench.
And you mentioned one thing that we don't know what was happening outside of Eden. That's a slippery slope. A lot of evolutionists use that. They say, oh, well, there was just this temporary little Eden thing where, Adam wouldn't die till he had the fruit, but everywhere else in the world, they were just going on business as usual, dying and killing and evolving. But that's not what the Book of Mormon teaches. The Book of Mormon says that um, all things would have remained in the state after which they were created if it weren't for the fall of man.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the earth was made in this perfect thing. It was this immortal thing. And it was only at the fall when death came into the world So this definitely eliminates the possibility of evolution for the origin of species.
I agree with you there, right? I'm not a believer in evolution. What
Yeah,
my
okay.
what I'm saying here is the old earth versus young earth. And even though nothing was killing each other outside the garden, it still doesn't say what was it doesn't preclude that the materials used to build the earth were significantly older than the formed earth that we have now.
Yeah.
That's my argument.
Okay, well, should we move on?
Yep, let's move on.
Okay. I won't read all this, but one thing to be very aware of in the restoration is that we do have at least 3 restoration references that the days of creation could be talking about 1,000-year periods.
Hmm.
Okay. So in JST, 2 Peter 3:8, it says 1 day with the Lord is as 1,000 a years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. And then in facsimile 2, figure 1, says Kolob, signifying the first creation nearest to the celestial or residence of God, first in government, last pertaining of time, which, by the way, apparently God does have time because it says it right there. It's a Protestant idea that God doesn't have time. And yeah, there's a Bible reference. I know, time no more, but it's time as we know it no more. Okay.
Hmm.
So the measurement of celestial time, okay, temporal time no more, right?
Okay.
This thing's going to change. Celestial time, okay, signifies 1 day to 1 cubit. 1 day on Kolob is equal to 1,000 years according to the measurement of this earth, which is called by the Egyptians Jewe. Okay. So there it was right there. There's got the measurement. And by the way, this takes on another huge evolution argument, which is that the scriptures are not a science textbook.
Yeah,
You ever
see
heard that
that I would,
before?
yeah.
This looks like scientific terms to me. Measurement, the equal to the measurement and the length of and all this. Okay. So this is scientific terms right here. Like God doesn't make this arbitrary distinction between science and religion that we do, or temporal and spiritual. So quit saying that the Bible and the scriptures are not a science textbook. Yeah, obviously the main purpose is not that, but we'll get into more about how the scriptures are not going to be, just flat wrong. It's like, would Jesus use a parable like the parable of the man who loved to be a communist slave? Uh, I don't know. It's not reality. So
Right.
so God's not going to paint a non-reality nature to us in the scriptures either. And when we get into the days of creation, how evolution days are just patently opposite of scripture days, that's a big hitter there. Okay. The last one is Abraham 3. Okay, it talks about, okay, that one revolution is like, again, these are more science terms. The
Right.
time appointed, like this is measurement, this is calculation. Okay, one is set to rule this, one's set to rule that. These facts exist. Okay. It's set here in this location. Okay. So anyway, I'm not gonna read that because we're gonna move on. Okay. They make this claim in the Let's Talk book that Abraham implies evolution when he says this. Can we read you the verse? You tell me if you agree with the authors that this is screaming evolution, okay? And the gods prepared the waters that they might bring forth great whales and every living creature that moveth, and the waters were to bring forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after their kind, and the gods thought they would be obeyed, and their plan was good. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, I
When you
don't,
read that, did you just become a
no,
lifelong evolutionist?
no, I didn't. No.
Says the one thing that I could see here, it says the waters prepared that the waters might bring forth great whales. So I'm assuming they're meaning, oh well, I guess the microbes evolved into whales in the water. Like I'm trying to see where they're getting this from. But then if you had that crazy idea, then it goes on to say everything's after its kind. The wingfowl
Right.
after their kind, after their kind. And so wouldn't the whales bring after their kind? Like,
Absolutely.
did evolution happen up until whales and then everything only was after its kind? That's the kind
Right.
of non-logic that we're seeing here.
Right.
Is that logic?
No. No.
No, it's not logic. Okay. Now, the next verse gives even more context that the days of creation were actual days. Okay. They didn't include this in their book. It says, and the God said, we'll bless them and cause them to bring forth multiply, fill the waters and the seas. Okay. Cause the fowl to multiply. And it came to pass that it was from evening until morning, that they called night, and it came to pass that it was from morning until evening that they called day, and it was the fifth time. So clearly here he's showing that the days of creation, they were actual days. And like I said, that was either our 24-hour day of, you know, I find that unlikely, but it's likely God's day, right? It says it takes the 1,000 years for one revolution to complete, right? For one spin on the axis, I mean, for one day
Right.
to happen. So clearly, these days of creation, according to Abraham, are actual actual days. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. No, I see
The
what you're
evolution
saying there.
form say,
It's a measured period of time.
which correlates to day and night
Right.
every time.
Whether it's ours or God's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you can't just say the common evolution argument, which is, well, we don't really know how long the days of creation were. And yeah, we don't have the exact amount of time, but we do know that they are limited to 1 day cycles.
Right.
Um, okay, this part is, I said the tails part was my favorite part. This part's my second favorite part.
Okay.
Okay, they say that scripture got the creation order wrong. Okay, listen to what they said. Quote, potential issues of compatibility with evolution only arise if one stipulates that the creative periods had to occur in the exact order described. Close quote.
Hmm.
So, did you see what they just said?
Right.
Okay. They said evolution works as long as you don't think the creation days are in the right order. Okay. Wow.
Excuse me.
How, yeah. Holy cow. Um, okay, let's look at it. Okay. The Bible and evolution, they're complete opposites. Okay. Bible says earth before the sun and stars. Evolution says sun before stars and earth. Okay. This might be hard for you to swallow because the whole accretion model, it's just another evolution nonsense that, the Big Bang happened and there was all this fiery guts going everywhere, and then it revolved, and then there's these nice little planets, and they're this planar field. And okay, that's a big fairy tale. You got to get rid of that version of the creation. And remember, the book of Moses says when he's talking to Abraham about how the world was made, he said, guess what? I'm only telling you about your world. Okay.
Right.
Seeing the creation accounts are localized creation events.
Right.
God didn't just make the whole universe in those 7 days. Okay.
Right.
This creation narrative was specific to our world. Okay. So the Bible says oceans before land, evolution says land before oceans. Bible says light before the sun, evolution says sun before the light. Bible says land plants before marine life. Evolution says marine life before land plants. Bible says fruit trees before fish. Evolution says fish before fruit trees. Bible says fish before insects. Bible says the opposite. Bible says plants before the sun. Evolution says the opposite. Bible says birds before reptiles. Evolution says the opposite. Bible says, here's the big hitters. Bible says that man brought death into the world. Evolution says death brought man into the world. And the ultimate, right?
Right.
Okay, is death the hero in this story?
No,
Because
the villain, right? I mean,
it's the
that's,
villain.
yeah.
Are we to thank death for our life on earth?
Right.
That's the evolution story. And finally, the Bible says God created man, and evolution says man created God. Okay.
Right.
Now, but you got to admit here, these are some stark differences. Um, the question is, not only is the Bible not a scientific textbook, but the Bible is the opposite of truth,
Is
right?
what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. They're saying as long as you can throw away the creation account from multiple scriptures where God himself is talking in the first person about how it happened, as long as you don't mind, you know, rearranging all of that, evolution is perfect. Okay.
Right.
Now, um, so this is just heresy on every possible level. One thing that I will bring up here, the sun, okay? Okay, when the Bible, it actually does say the sun was the fourth day. And in the temple, they recently corrected it to where the sun does, it's on the fourth day now. I'm pretty darn sure that it didn't used to be that way. And then when they changed it, I was like, oh, holy crap, they put it in the correct spot that the scripture says it is. Okay, now don't strike me down, but I'll that's what happened. Okay. Now, how does this happen where you have the Earth before the sun? Well, according to our planetary nebula hypothesis, that's not how it works at all. But okay, and I will say, okay, just for those of you who really, really, really like the idea that the sun had to be here before the Earth, okay, I will say maybe it was. I'm not going to die on that hill. And the way they explain this is they say, well, maybe the clouds were covering the sun, and the clouds parted on day 4, and that's when he was able to see the you know
The
the
lights in
sun.
the sky, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't like that at all, but I'm just gonna throw it out there that sure, that's a possibility. But think of this possibility too. Think of the supernatural possibility. Okay. That maybe the light source was something else on the earth. If the sun wasn't the light source until day 4. Okay. Um, Book of Revelation tells us that there will be an alternate light source for the planet in the future. It says, and there shall be no night there, and they need no candle, neither light of the sun. For the Lord God giveth them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. It's Revelation 22:5. So the future light source of this planet is not going to be the sun. Okay? So it's not totally off limits to say that the past light source of the sun was different. Maybe the earth itself glowed, or maybe just the presence of God creating the thing was sufficient, right? The point is, why do we reject all of these? Why do we say the scriptures have to come second? Why
Right.
does the science always get to tell us how things happen? Because they're just theories, and um, we we really, people don't realize how theoretical these things are. And we need to allow for supernatural alternatives to exist because the scriptures say that history is chock full of supernatural alternatives to it wasn't just uniform theory of everything going on the same. Uniform theory is code word for atheist theory. There's no supernatural, no changes. Okay. So anyway, that's enough about
Nate,
that.
Nate, can we go back to the age of the Earth just real quick? Because I do want to
Yeah.
point this out. This is from the Joseph Smith papers, and it was reported by William Clayton.
Okay.
So some prominent LDS historians have put this in there. And here's what Joseph said: the world and earth are not synonymous terms. The world is the human family. The earth was organized or formed out of other planets which were broke up and remodeled and made into one on which we live. The elements are eternal. That which has a beginning will surely have an end. Take a ring, it is without beginning or end. Cut it for a beginning place, and at the same time, you have an ending place.
Okay.
So
Um,
that's from Joseph Smith, right?
yeah.
And I only bring this up because I do want to leave room here to allow people to debate this, right? Just like I don't want to look at evolutionists and allow them to say that the science is settled. I think we have to take all of our information to come up with a hypothesis, right?
Okay. Yeah. And my hat's off to Joseph, every day. And I will quickly agree um, that he taught that. Especially, yeah. Let's go with this. You can still see though that what Joseph's saying and what evolution is saying are quite different.
They are, yes. And I think that's the point we want to make here, right? Is that we can have disagreements with each other and not find ourselves on the fast track to evolution.
Yeah. In my head, the obvious picture is not that Earth has been sitting around for 4.6 billion years, slowly evolving the life forms on it,
Right.
right? That's totally not what Joseph said
Nope.
there.
Nope. I agree.
Joseph said there, he said, this Earth was made from pieces of other Earths, right?
Right.
Okay. And so in my head, I picture, there's these other planets, and maybe some pieces of them get extracted to, put together, assemble the new planet.
Right. Yep.
Either way, um, that's still a pretty young Earth in my head
Sure.
because it was assembled.
Sure. But the elements would be older, right? Which could account for the carbon dating,
Okay,
right?
I guess.
Now,
Possibly.
you could say that the carbon dating might be correct, but their ending hypothesis is still wrong.
Well, from my research, I can't say the carbon dating can be correct because I've even seen other plethora of examples where it's not correct on so many levels. But
Okay.
well,
Okay. And I'll take your word for it. You're a scientist. I'm just a moron that talks into a microphone. So,
well, and that's what we're both trying to. That's the idea we're both trying to attack is don't just take the word of scientists. And I'm just saying from my experience, my view is that it's it's not reliable on any level.
sure. Sure. Nope. I get that. Anyway, I just wanted to back up my source. I was spouting there without backing up my source, and that was bugging me. I don't like doing that. So,
Okay. Um, so yeah. Especially as you get older, it gets less reliable. That's what
oh,
I'm
dude, you have no idea.
yeah.
Or at least
Okay.
that's what I tell my wives when I forget something.
Yeah.
So,
Um, okay. We already talked about this. Jacob said you need you can't okay, you can't know about the creation without revelation. He specifically says that the creation was done by God saying stuff and then it happened. Um, so by the power of his word, man came upon the face of the earth. Man, go to the earth. All right, here I am. And wherefore God being able to speak and the world was, and to speak and man was created. Well, then why not able to command the earth? Okay, so in other words, God can command the earth and it obeys him. Okay.
yep.
Um, so does he command the earth, hey, earth, please, like, let's negotiate. I'll do you a favor if you do me a favor. Could you please, like, maybe create a monkey for me? Like, I really need that monkey to get my Atom on scene. Could you just, well, no, it's going to cost you. All right, fine. Well, I can get that done for you in 4 billion years, for a small fee. He's like, look, I need to double it. I need it in 2 billion. What you got? Like, well, that's going to cost you even more. Okay, that's not how it went. God was the boss, and he's
Right.
the boss, and he made it happen. Um, Okay, now an important thing is that your scientists have to be men of God, okay? Listen to how Isaac Newton studied. He said, all my discoveries have been made in answer to prayer.
Wow.
He said, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. So here's a question.
That never gets touted when you start
Yeah,
talking about Newton, ever.
no. And do you hear today's scientists saying, the more I study evolution, the more I believe in God?
Not many of them. A
Or,
few, but
or
not many.
Or do we hear do we hear Darwin saying, the more I prayed about it, the more I just knew that evolution was the origin of species?
Right.
Explain.
Yep.
Newton says, a man may imagine things to be false, but he can only understand things to be true.
Mm.
Now you compare that to, so in other words, was Darwin this prophet of biology that gave us the grand revelation of the latter days, you
No.
know?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Nope.
Now this part is where it's the really, I'm sorry to say it, which might sound rude, but this is where they really get into the 1984 double think, like now you see it, now you don't kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yep. The
Okay,
new speak.
this is where they quote the first presidency statements because they know they have to deal with these. Okay. They say, quote, neither first presidency statement confirmed or denied the claims of evolutionary science. Close quote.
Oh gosh. Really?
That's what they said. Okay.
Okay.
So now we're going to read those first presidency statements, and you tell me if they didn't confirm or deny the claims of evolutionary science. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. President Smith, 1909. It is held by some that Adam was not the first man upon this earth, and that the original human being was a development from lower orders of the animal creation. These, however, are the theories of men. The word of the Lord declares that Adam was the first man of all men. Moses 134. And we are therefore in duty bound to regard him as the primal parent of our race. It was shown to the brother of Jared that all men were created in the beginning after the image of God. And whether we take this to mean the spirit or the body or both, it commits us to the same conclusion. Man began life as a human being in the likeness of our Heavenly Father. Close quote.
I don't know how you get evolution out of that.
Yeah, what was he talking about?
Like where show me how you come up with that.
Yeah,
Um, that makes no sense.
it was held by some. By who, I wonder? That Adam was not the first man. Well, who was? That the original human was a development from lower orders of the animal creation. Yeah, I'm not seeing evolution in that at all. That definitely doesn't confirm or deny evolutionary science. And notice how they phrased it. Evolutionary science. It's like, okay, how about validated evolutionary science or
Right.
glorified evolutionary science? Let's just dress it up with all we can. Okay, the next one is President Grant, 1925. Quote, and again, these were both first presidency statements. All men and women are in the similitude of the universal father and mother, and are literally sons and daughters of deity. Man is the child of God, formed in the divine image and endowed with divine attributes. And even as the infant, son of an earthly father and mother, is capable in due time of becoming a man, so that undeveloped offspring of celestial parentage is capable by experience through ages and aeons of evolving into a god. Close quote.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing that I could point to is that it uses the word evolve. Um, Other than that, I don't see anything there that would indicate that early church leaders were down with evolution.
Yeah, the word evolving here, as if the word evolving only has the meaning of, you know,
Crossing
um,
species and
yeah,
becoming something different.
right, right. And then ages and eons, like, okay, tell me exactly how long he meant personally by using those words.
Right.
And then, you know, and let's say it does take us a while to figure it out and become like our heavenly parents. Okay, but still, okay, so up there he says literally sons and daughters. What does that mean to be a literal son of someone,
That
right?
means that your parentage is secure. You know who your
Right,
parents are.
right. Okay. Formed in the divine image. Okay. Um, all right. So, and then they actually left out this part. So, um, later in that same Heber J. Grant statement, he goes on to say, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay. He calls Adam our progenitor, the first man. And then he says, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, basing its belief on divine revelation, ancient and modern, proclaims man to be the direct and lineal offspring of deity. Okay, so in other words, here he's throwing out even more genealogical terms.
Right.
Lineal. Okay, I don't know how much plainer you can get, man.
And they use all three of those statements in their book.
They use the first two.
Okay, they use the first two and they say that those first two statements show that the church did not have, or that early presidents of the church did not have a stance on evolution versus creationism.
Yes, they're saying these do not
Jeez.
confirm or deny. Uh, and that's
MSNBC would be proud.
who would?
MSNBC.
Oh yeah. So and then President Packer, he heard people saying this kind of crap that there's no official church statement. Um, they quote this little Ensign article. Okay, here it is. So they quote this Ensign article that says the church has no official church position on the theory of evolution. Organic evolution or changes to species inherited traits over time is a matter for scientific study. Nothing has been revealed concerning evolution. Though the details of what happened on Earth before Adam and Eve, including how their bodies were created, have not been revealed, our teachings regarding man's origin are clear and come from Revelation. Close quote. Okay, that statement, first off, it contradicted itself like 6 times.
Yes, it did.
And
Yes, it
then
did.
And then who wrote it? Who wrote that? Okay. That article has no name with it. So you get the badge of honor and bravery for that one, whoever you are. Okay. The next one is this in our scriptures? No. Is this a first presidency statement? No. This is some nameless paragraph in a New Era magazine. Okay.
But to be fair, you can't blame people for assuming it's somewhat authoritative if it's coming
Right.
out of a church-sponsored magazine, right?
True. It's true. So at any rate, it's sad that this is the kind of thinking that's happening right now, because you look at our history, our doctrine has unequivocally been against evolution. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. From day one.
Absolutely. And President Packer would hear people say, "There's no official position that the brethren have never made an official declaration," and he'll say, "No, this no official position hogwash. The first presidency has said at least twice, and now he's probably referring to the two that we read. They've said at least twice that we do stand against that unequivocally." So President Packer wasn't buying it, and you know what? It seems like more and more things we're saying, oh, there's no official stance on that. Oh, we don't know on that. So, and that's just a sign of the deteriorating, like we talked about earlier, we don't know our stuff anymore. And I talked to this, well, Alma Allred over at the Institute, I think he's retired now, but of religion in University of Utah. He would have these debates with this Protestant guy, because there's plenty of Protestants in Salt Lake City who just love debating the Mormons. And he says, 50 years ago, man, or probably not 50, okay, probably more like 20 or 30. Like I could find Mormons on the street and they'd debate me all the time. And they knew their doctrine, man. They knew that King Follett sermon. Like they knew about premortality and the exaltation to godhood. Like it was no problem for them. They knew the doctrine and they defended it. Nowadays, I can't even get young Mormons to talk to me. They
Hmm.
won't even debate. They just don't know their doctrine. I know their doctrine much better than which, that's kind of fair. But anyway, we just don't know anything anymore. Like I said, I mentioned we have gospel therapy class, not gospel doctrine class anymore. Okay, that was a joke. We don't. It's not officially changed to gospel therapy, but really, it's like you show up and all you talk about is getting comforted and getting forgiven and finding peace. It's like, okay, man, thank you. Now can we figure out what the scriptures are saying beyond this? Anyway, it's disappointing.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about that. The varying views of church leaders is not a thing. Okay. Um, from Joseph Smith down on to Nelson, none of them have promoted evolution. Like I said, McKay was a little soft. He implied that some people might not know for sure. I think one quote I read from McKay, he called the idea beautiful. Anyway, so that is a little washy, but the consistency is still here. Okay, it's still intact, and to claim, that they do that there's all these varying views over time of church leaders. That's not how it is. And we even had a recent general conference like within the last year where they were talking against evolution. So anyway, okay, we talked about that. I think we're wrapping up, thankfully. Um, okay, Nelson talks about death coming to the world from the fall. That we had it in, this paradise planet before that. Paradise planet, okay? Does that mean everyone's going around killing each other to survival of the fittest? That's
Oh,
not paradise planet,
nope.
okay? Um, all right. Um, they say science cannot offer evidence for or against the existence of God. Okay.
Ooh.
This is just one of like 24 weird statements they make about science and religion, how they try to divorce in every way possible science and religion. They try to divorce them in every way.
Right.
So they can say, well, I can do whatever I want with science and still hold a temple recommend, or I can, and yeah, you pretty much can. Like, we don't care these days in the church, what you think about evolution, right? Like, there's bigger fish to fry. But at the end of the day, man, this matters. It
Yep.
really does. People are getting killed all over from these leaders. You got all these people who go shoot up the schools, and they're all talking evolution, right? Take out the weak ones. And it's influencing all of our branches of science. It's influencing all of our social science to this day in negative ways. And it's just false from start to finish. And it's really frustrating. And to make this kind of claim that, science can't offer evidence for or against the existence of God, I'm sorry, man. When you, the Doctrine and Covenants says he's going to call the missionaries home and he's going to preach his own sermons
Yep.
by earthquakes and so forth. So guess what? Apparently that nature is going to be some pretty stirring evidence for God.
Yep.
Okay. And let me tell you, when we find 200 plus ways that you can prove the flood of Noah covered the earth, gosh, that's science that's giving evidence for God. I'm sorry. It is
Absolutely.
giving evidence for God. Like,
Absolutely.
this is such a heinous idea. This total divorce of all science from all things. Because what is religion? I mean, religion is history, man. In other words, it's saying you can't use any science to demonstrate any history. You may as well say that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point, Nate.
So this is just some philosophical hogwash. Okay. Uh, let's skip this. Let's skip this. The Book of Mormon says over and over, don't get those false teachers, man. Don't get those false teachers. They're puffed up in their pride. The saints are in error because they're taught by the precepts of men, preaching false doctrines. Watch out. Okay. This is something that I share whenever I can. President Packer said, all of the mocking does not come from outside of the church. Okay.
Hmm.
Packer is clear here that there is going to be people in the church who mock you when you stand up for the truth.
Right.
So I think everybody knows that by now, but just to be clear, like, that's a thing. So just because it's sitting on the shelf at Deseret Book doesn't mean it goes in the same case as your Bible. Like, this
Right.
is
Right. Right.
right.
It's not the additional scripture Joseph was talking about.
No, it's um yeah. There's this funny meme and it said if these two books, these it says if those two books if you ever let those two books touch each other, I'll kill you.
Right. That's got to be on a cute like Relief Society sign on Nate's house, right? You ever let the scriptures and this abomination of a book touch, I'll kill you. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Satan is a skillful imitator. Okay, Joseph Smith said again, the book really Satan's deceived the whole world. Okay, give up, like you were saying, Dave, earlier. Stop trying to fit in. Give up on the idea that Satan is not good at his game. Satan is good at his game, man. He's got all the state officials. He's got all the academic journals. He's got it all. He's bought the whole world. He's bought and paid for everything. You know,
Yep.
he can sell you a real interesting deception that when you're in your ignoramus mind, you're gonna say, "Gosh, I guess evolution's just got to be true. Look at the evidence." It's like, no, there is the possibility that you can be deceived,
Yep.
and that's the thing is throughout their book they say, "Don't be dogmatic." It's like, guess what? The only possibility that you've ever entertained in your book is that evolution is the rock solid gospel.
Right. They
That
just
everything
say
else
don't
is
be
false.
dogmatic in the other
Yeah,
direction.
right, right. Okay, let's skip that and stuff. A common thing that happens is they'll find this plain scripture, like Second Nephi 2:22, no death before the fall, and the scripture about all things must have remained in this way they were in the manner they were created without the fall. Well, it doesn't really mean that. You see this and this and this. It's like, okay,
It's the same
they're
people that use the term living constitution to make
yeah.
it mean something it doesn't.
It's like who is the gospel for, right? And who's the Book of Mormon for? It's like it's not just for PhDs, right?
Right.
Um, and the script they say in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Mormon says if you wrest the scriptures, in other words, if you change them to fit your agenda, it's to your own destruction.
Yep.
So there's some very clear warnings that these scriptures are plain. The restoration is all about giving us the plain and precious stuff. And let me tell you, to make the scriptures fit with evolution, that is anything but plain and precious. Okay. Second Nephi chapter 1, verse 10. They there'll come a time when the time cometh, so it will come when the time cometh, they shall dwindle in unbelief after they've received so many great blessings from the hand of the Lord, having a knowledge of the creation. Okay, in other words,
Mm.
the knowledge of the creation is something they will lose. We've lost it, man.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's right in there. 2 Nephi 1:10. It's prophesied that we will reject the knowledge of the creation. Okay.
Hmm.
Anyway,
How about that
um,
for prophetic?
yeah. Okay, man, they keep going and going, man, and I keep rebutting and rebutting, and it's kind of nauseating. So anyway, I think we're let me just see here. I think we're pretty much done.
Okay. All right. Nate, I'm going to let you kind of wrap up with what you got to say. And then I have a couple things I want to say on this, but I want to make it clear that what I'll say at the end are my views, not yours on this, because I'm going to say some pretty pointed stuff here. So
Okay.
you go ahead and kind of give me your synopsis here of this.
All right, my synopsis is first off, you need to know that they are pushing this at BYU, and it's not just let's make you aware of the theories of men. It's you need to accept this theory of men, and you need to put it above. You need to reorient your entire religious philosophy to make sure that evolution is at the heart of that. Okay.
Yep.
And then obviously we talked a lot of examples of how evolution science is not all it's cracked up to be. Okay. So don't sell out on this topic. Don't ditch your faith in the name of evolution because it's not worth it. Evolution is a dying theory. And the authors of this book, they're trying to get people, they say they're trying to like save testimonies, right? But the point is there's they're doing it the wrong way. The ultimate way to save testimonies is truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's not just put a band-aid on the problem that 10 years later, when evolution shows up that it's all been a hoax and the Babylon falls, oh crap. Like why was the church telling me that evolution is true? Like, and to be clear, the church is not telling you that evolution is true. It's the intellectuals within the church that think they own the thing that are, doing this. So anyway, you're gonna do the most good by teaching the truth and scripture, in other words, religion and science combined to reject evolution.
Right. Okay. I brought this up before when I did a podcast on the Doctrine of Christ movement and Michelle Brady Stone and some of their assertions that Brigham Young was responsible solely for plural marriage and that Brigham Young and John Taylor conspired to have Joseph Smith killed.
Yeah, wow.
What they don't look at, and they never look at this, are what are the downstream consequences of believing that and throwing out 132? Well, the downstream consequences are this: temple rights go out the window, ceilings go out the window. Um, you then have a defunct leadership of the church, which then creates issues when you start again talking about authority and those sorts of things. Those are the unintended consequences, or maybe intended. I don't know what their motive is.
They're detonating the whole restoration either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So I want to take a look at what the downstream intended or unintended consequences are here of embracing this idea that man is simply a noble animal, that he is a product of chance things. And I know that this book pushes for kind of an intelligent design, kind of quasi evolutionary abomination of marriage
Uh-huh.
between science and religion. But
Yeah.
here are the downstream consequences. And that's this: what one generation tolerates, the next generation accepts and embraces. It's just the way
Mhm.
it is. So if we are now indoctrinating a generation of kids to see how evolution can work within a religious framework, especially a restorationist framework, is that in a generation or two, you'll have a ton of Mormons who just give up their testimonies entirely.
Oh yeah.
because that's what happens. They embrace it fully.
There's nothing left.
Right. There's nothing left. You take out the foundation, you're done. Right. Any structural engineer tell you if your foundation is bad, you got nothing else. It's all coming down.
Got it.
Here's the other unintended consequence. When you detach yourself from a God who is personal, a God who is all knowing, omniscient, all those things, you now have carte blanche to throw away the morals and the values that are associated with that God. And if man is nothing more than an animal, then all sorts of things can be justified, right? I've had atheists tell me if you cheat on your wife, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Don't worry about it, right? Just do better next time. Morality will go out the window if you espouse the idea that man is nothing more than an evolved animal, bar none. So those are some of the downstream consequences I see of embracing this. Now, here's where I want to make really clear. These are my opinions now and not Nate's. I would rally behind the church, never rejoin, but I would rally behind them if they took a stand on this. Now, I don't know what the dynamics are. I don't know how an abomination of an article like the one that you showed me makes its way into the new era, right? Something designed for the youth.
Right.
Who's falling asleep on the watchtower? And I know those are pointed words, but those are words that have to be asked. How does BYU, that's named for a guy who said, no, evolution is absolutely horrible, and here's what really happened. Adam was placed here from another planet. How in the hell does that get through? Now, people can say, well, the church is big now, right? I mean, there's multi-arms of it, and there's corporations to it and those sorts of things. But last time I checked, BYU is still funded by and large with a lot of money out of Salt Lake.
Lots of tithing.
Lots of tithing. And that's got to go through Salt Lake. And I applaud Elder Holland's talk where he talked about more musket fire on there. I thought that was a heck of a talk, and I thought that was one that was needed.
Cool.
But I'm going to be blunt here. It's not enough.
Sure.
Okay. You need to do what Joseph F. Smith did. If you're serious about this, if you're serious about the testimonies of your youth, you have to start firing people's butts. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Just say, you know what? We ain't going to be able to hug it out here. Good luck to you. On to somewhere else for you. But we're going to do something different.
It's
And
like the Trump Biden debate. Trump's like, how many people did you fire, Biden?
right. At some point, you're going to have to take a hard stance. And maybe that's going to affect certain things that we hold dear, like accreditation, like participation in NCAA sports, right? NCAA sports, excuse me. But where is your morality on this? Is this something that, and this will remain to be seen, is this something that you're willing to tolerate until it's accepted? As of right now, the answer looks like yes, but the jury's still out. I know from people that this does get listened to by folks inside the church with some authority, and that's where I'll leave that. My challenge would be to find your spine and put this crap correct. Because all this crap is getting pumped out of your university, funded by members' tax dollars, tithing money. Maybe it's time that a couple big donors just stop donating. The other thing I would say is that this is a job also for the run-of-the-mill member in the church. For too long, ground has been ceded to the vocal minority to get all sorts of leftist things through. Well, maybe it's time that the more conservative arm starts being just as vocal. There's a common misconception out there, and I want to get this out of the way again, that I want to see the LDS church fail. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I think the world is a better place for having the church in it. But you can't have it both ways on this. There is no middle ground to be had. It's either one or the other. There is no happy medium because one will win. Christ said it, you can't serve two masters. You're either going to espouse what the scripture says, what historical prophets have said throughout time, even some modern presidents of the church have said throughout time. But you got to do it. And you got to find your backbone if you're in the leadership in the LDS church. You've got to bring the hammer down and you've got to put this correct, or else you stand to lose an entire generation out of BYU. I think you probably already lost one generation. The question now becomes is, can you correct this boat? And you can, but you're going to have to do some unpopular things that are principled in order to get it done. But make no doubt that evolution, quite frankly, is a doctrine from hell that will lead people to places of depravity given the opportunity. The doctrine of creation is one of nobility. It is one in which there is a divine spark of God placed in each and every one of his children, both physically and spiritually. Evolution is a doctrine of accepting the natural man as he is, because darn it, that's just the way nature intended it. And you can't have both of those that exist simultaneously in the same space. One will win out over the other. What's going to happen in the church with it, I can't say. My hope is that somebody puts this correct and that BYU can find itself again on a good footing within the gospel, doing good science that not only is in pursuit of science, but also that seeks to understand how God does his work. And that those are my statements on this. Again, those aren't Nate's, those are mine. I've leveled some heavy criticism here, but I think it's well-founded. And I quite frankly think it's beyond time that leadership takes care of this, because there's not enough musket fire coming out of BYU right now. So that's all I got, dude. It was good stuff.
Thanks so much. This was really fun, and I'm honored to be able to share these important messages.
Dude, I love to have you on, and let's keep doing it as you come up with new stuff, because I have a feeling that this won't be the last time that something like this rears its head.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, Nate, hang out for just a minute, and everyone else, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.